So you know that Tim Davies? Yeah, Tim Davies of Fast Jet Performance fame. FJP for life, bro. FJP for life. Tim flew Hawks and Tornadoes for Her Majesty's Royal Air Force and is among the very best ever to do it. Check it out.
To get rid of the speed to roll out downwind so we can select his services. There's roll, pull, idle, air brake or travel. He'll probably keep that aircraft on the light buffer there. It was a 4G brake looking out the top, and he's going to have to roll out, as I said, north at 1,000 feet. So he's climbed 500 feet, which helps him get the speed off. And he's going to roll out, check his dead wing, make sure he hasn't got any traffic on the left-hand side. And he's going to try and put his wingtip down the runway, as you can see there, so he doesn't close into the airfield there at RAF Valley. Now he's got to slow down, get below 200 knots, which happens really at the threshold where he's about to tip in, and then he's going to travel his air brake in, check the MI, says that it's in, and travel the gear down below 200 knots. He's also going to travel down flat below 200 knots as well, and he's going to tip in and start the pull. And as he pulls, the gear and the flap are still travelling, they're not locked down. That page on the left hand MFD you might see there is the hide page that I select because it gives me an indication if I've got any hydraulic problems. And halfway around this turn, the gear is finally going to give him 3 greens and the flap should give him down flap. And really he can't pull too much alpha in this turn until he gets that down flap, so he's got to kind of vary that a little bit. Halfway around then he should be at 650 feet, that's a good judgment, and again he's then bleeding his speed off to his alpha, which is 5 alpha he's going to land at. Approach speed today for us, we are heavy, it's about 125 knots, 127 knots in fact, a little bit more than normal. And also we're going to carry about 5 knots in for gusts, because gusts come across the undulations just south of the runway, sorry, north of the runway threshold here, but towards us before we land, and they can cause some rotors and some vortexes coming up there, so we hold a few knots here. We're also going to stream the chute here, and I do point the camera out back to see that. So we do have good 20-25 knots on the nose, but we are heavy, so we're a little bit concerned, and we have briefed the barrier speed in case for some reason we don't stop. Nicely touched down there, bang, nose down.
But I think Tim is much more than merely a retired flying supremo. He's some kind of top-notch life coach, dropping truth bombs on your personal battlefield with unerring precision. He's a leader of men, basically. Kind of undeniably. If you haven't already chucked Tim a sub, you're going to need to go ahead and square that away real quick. Okay, remaining unsubbed to Fast Jet Performance is an activity you have not been approved for. Remedy that ASAP, please. Now, if you want to hear your history bro ask him questions about civil and military aviation that he's absurdly overqualified to be answering, then you're in luck, my friends. Hit it.
I do a lot of coaching, not lecturing sort of thing, to companies and everything. And one of the things I do say is, you make your own path. It's the work you put in, isn't it?
I heard another pilot, I was doing some research for this actually, heard another pilot encapsulate it so perfectly. He was an American, but he said, in America at least, but it means in the West really, you can do anything, be anything, just don't be lazy.
Yeah.
If you try, you can do most things. You're
going to get somewhere.
Yeah. I'm not tall enough to be an NBA star, but, within reason.
Yeah, well, I failed my A-levels. I still end up being a very senior pilot in the Royal Air Force. I've got 2 E's and an N. And then I had to go to university. I went to Bristol. It was University of West of England, like old Bristol Poly, which is a great place. And I did an HND in engineering, manufacturing, technology, and that led to a degree. And I managed to scrape through my degree, getting 2-2. And the Air Force, I didn't really. Well, I don't think I applied again to the Air Force. I went to apply to the Navy instead because the Navy likes wastes and strays. You know what I mean? It's like pirates, basically, the Navy. You know what I'm saying? And I like pirates because pirates are good people. Pirates were good people. They got a bad old rat pirates, but I joined the Navy, and then eventually after 5 years in the Navy, we lost the Sea Harrier, and I wasn't probably good enough to go on the Sea Harrier anyway. I was more of a ground attack guy, you know what I mean? And so the Air Force turned around to about 9 of us and said, "Do you want to come across and fly big jets in the Air Force?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't want to go through flying training again, flying helicopters, so I will." That's Dartmouth up there. That's Dartmouth is a great place. I had a great time there. And then up on the wall here, you got tornadoes and stuff. It's like a little homage wall to career. But I'm still transitioning out of that career at the moment now, so I'm happy to talk about it. I won't talk about it forever, though, to be fair, because I'm moving on to other things.
Right, sure. Well, that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Maybe it could lead into that sort of your early life. One of the things I wondered: were you a kid that, were you the sort of the 6, 7, 8-year-old that looked up at planes and just knew that's what you wanted to do, or was it? Did you come to it late, or did you stumble into it?
I think most pilots, when they're young, and that's a great age actually. My nephew's about 6 now. Like he's starting to think about things. You know what I mean? Yeah, most pilots under the age of 10, they start flying planes around, and then they either become engineers or they become pilots, or they might become something else professional wise because they have a something, maybe their eyesight is off or something like that, but they tend to be going to a profession, legal or medical. It just so happened that I wanted to fly. I was an air cadet, how it is. Because when you look at uniform service, right, since the age of about whenever Cubs start, I was in Cubs, and I was in Air Cadets, then I was in Officer Training Corps, then I was in the Navy, then the Air Force. So I've got this very long timeline of being in uniform service. It's not necessarily healthy, Bo, don't get me wrong, but it just is what it is. So yeah, you look at it and you think, I like to do that. You don't really know what people fly or who flies what, but I was always like the sharp, pointy, noisy things. But also, I thought helicopters were quite interesting, and so I eventually applied to the Air Force for a sixth form scholarship, and I got a flying scholarship, which taught me to fly like a PA-28 Little Piper, which is quite nice, for about 30 hours. And then I met a guy there, and we both ended up joining the Navy, not the Air Force. And he spent a long time in the Navy. Actually, I spent about 5 years and then transferred across. But yeah, you're young. I think you're young when you do it. It's rare. You do find pilots that go, I just walked in the careers office. I don't think it really happens anymore. You have to have it where you've kind of, because there are things you need to do if you want to be a pilot. You need to sort your maths out, and you need to sort your academics out, and it doesn't just happen overnight. You need to sort of maybe be involved in Duke of Edinburgh and that kind of stuff, and be a bit active in leadership and some sport. So that takes a bit of time. So you need to, start early. So in short, it probably was.
Right.
I'll cut that down next time and go, yeah.
Were you interested in like the sort of aviation history, or just like, were you the sort of kid that would always just look at picture books of sort of World War II fighters, World War One, or the earliest aviation, or did that sort of come later?
I think that
came later. Are you fascinated in the whole world of aviation, or was it always just fighters? I want to be in the RAF, or what was it like?
Initially you do look at commercial, and there's not much else apart from commercial as in airliners and military. It's not, we don't have a huge sort of float plane industry in the UK or anything. It's like you tend to go, I'll go to an airline or go to the military, and then from that you might bounce out into something else, because flying instructors aren't paid that much in private flight schools. It still must be a great job, but that's not something you ever think about. I'm going to be a small aircraft flying instructor. You don't. So for me, the military held all the best toys. Right. And you can't fly jets anywhere else. You just can't. And also you can't fly the kind of helicopters they flew. And my brother was a Hercules pilot, and he went TAC Hercs in the end, and he flew Hercs in Canada. He used to land them on beaches and stuff, and throw people out the back of them and all sorts. And in Afghanistan, he was tooled up and he had his bandana on his shorts and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? He's an idiot, but he's he loved that. But again, you couldn't do that outside. I mean, he flies for an airline now, but he could do that inside. And so it is a great place to be for a period of time. But so I was interested in history to a certain extent, but I must admit, I think I'm not going to be critical of schooling. I haven't got kids, but I do wonder whether we're giving the kids the correct resources to go out and investigate this stuff themselves. I didn't know much about it at school. I don't remember learning much about British history. I did an A-level in Nazi Germany. I was interested in that kind of thing. I'm still interested. I'm a Germanophile now. I love Germany. So in that respect, I think I probably, through Air Cadets, did a lot of history and stumbled across stuff. And you have, the funny thing is, when you talk, you sometimes talk about bits of history, and I'm like, when was that? And I have to go back and look at it. I'm like, when was, I didn't, you know what I mean? I just think there's a lot that we kind of don't get filled in. And it fascinates me. It's brilliant. I love it. But the same thing with aviation. It's like, if you said, what about 60s aviation? I'm like, yeah, what about 60s? What happened in this? What was flying in this? You know what I mean? It's like, am I missing out big chunks of history? You'll find a lot of pilots aren't necessarily completely interested in the history of aviation. And it's not because they're not, but because when they are pilots, it's a full-on job that doesn't end when you come home, because you're working for the next day. And it's very busy. And I think that's how I was with it. It's like, I'm on fire for 20 years, and then I left, and I'm like, now I'm interested in history a bit more. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's how it is.
Right. Because I went through a phase of, I was the kid that loved aeroplanes and wanted to be a pilot. I suppose at some point it was never sort of a super strong pull for me though. It wasn't like I must become a pilot. But I was probably like most little boys, had books and interested in it. And so I wondered. There was a point when I was probably in my early 20s or mid 20s when I just, for whatever reason, became fascinated with the Wright brothers and the story of the first powered flight.
Yeah.
Because we were going up in balloons since the 18th century, late 18th century. But the powered flight, sort of the story of that. Quick question actually, I wanted to ask you. Would going up in a hot air balloon for you be fun? Would you jump at the chance? Of course I want to do that. Or would it be like,
No, I'll do
no?
that. Yeah. No, I'll do it.
All right.
I'll take a picnic. The
Right.
thing about jet world is you're strapped in, you've got this life-saving gear on, you've got a mask on your face and a helmet and a visor, and it's a bit uncomfortable. So being in a balloon, looking down at some fields, it's all been quite chilled. Apparently it's not chilled though, is it? Because they put the burner on, everyone's like, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'll go up in a balloon. I don't mind that. Ballooning seems to be done on light wind days, nice summer days, isn't it? So, I mean, you're flying anything, you fly. I don't mind. I think people that fly gliders just fantastic. I love how the spirit of their hobby and everything else, and the way they talk about it. Also, I knew someone that was a balloon pilot. You know what I mean? It was. I mean, you're talking about Samuel. Was it Pierpoint Langley? Isn't it the guy who was competing with the Wright brothers and stuff?
Right.
Yeah, he was the guy that was following. I like that story. That to me is a story about like theory over action, isn't it? Where the Wright brothers were in a bicycle shop and they had this thing about stability, didn't they? Where they were really concentrating on like, right, a pilot's going to have to keep this thing stable. Whereas Pierpoint Lang had all these tech heads, didn't he? And all these all these people with him, and he's unlimited funding, and he really wanted to make a name of himself. He was 50, I think, wasn't he? And he said he believed the aircraft was going to be inherently stable to just be then nudged around by the pilot. The Wright brothers were like, that's not going to work because we're not, you know what I mean? So they would go for trial and error, wouldn't they? Just trial. And he would build this big machine and launch it off a boat, wouldn't he? And it would just go, he'd do that a couple of times. And so I use that story sometimes with men I coach. And I say, look, you've literally got to go out and experiment in order to achieve anything. We can use our brains forever, and we can think about the problem forever, and nothing's going to get better in your life. All right, it's not. We know this. We've actually got to go outside, unfortunately, and I'm the worst for it because I haven't done any phys for a few months now. But if you want to get big, you want to get healthy, you've got to start. You've got to do something. You've got to pick up a weight. You've got to, you know what I mean? It's a progress, and I think that's the story of the Wright brothers. They were like, well, we'll give it a go. That's the other thing about Pierpoint Langley, wasn't it? He was interested in power. He felt power was going to be the thing. And I think there was an issue with power at that time. They just couldn't get what they needed for his machines to fly properly. Whereas the Wright brothers were like, it's not about power necessarily. It's more about, it's about the balance of the aircraft. That's what they're into, isn't it? It's like this aircraft, if we can balance it properly and we can get enough speed on it, we can actually just get this thing to float for 59 seconds, whatever. Was that 1983? Was it? Early
03, yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting story I use. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Wright brothers, where they seemed. It's funny, man has attempted to copy the bird since the dawn of time, I suppose. And it's just interesting to think that it was only in 1903 that it was first done. And yeah, they needed the miniaturization of an internal combustion engine, the power to weight thing. You'll know way more about that than I ever will. But I think the Wright brothers, one of their big things was that they were able to something about wing warping. They had some sort of good design on that, but it's interesting actually. One little anecdote: there was a few years after 1903, so I don't know when, but there was some sort of big exhibition at Le Mans in France, and everyone from all around the world went there, including the Wright brothers. And some people were able to sort of skip their contraption off the runway for a few seconds, like you say, at a time. And the Wright brothers turn up and just fly around for like an hour and a half. And they were just so far ahead. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about is how it seems surprising that you get 1903, the first time anyone ever skipped any contraption off the ground. And then by 1914, the beginning of World War One, you've already got like guys essentially doing like aerobatics and stuff. They're still just made out of sort of wood and canvas. Yeah. The early biplanes, but it just seems to me fantastic that the jump there, and of course during World War One itself, from 14 to 18, it's an incredible leap. That makes more sense if great empires are pumping endless money and research into it. But do you think it's surprising that you went from nothing to the technology in say 1918? Is that surprising to you or not?
Well, when did video games come out? And I teach online now people to fly high-end fast jets using virtual reality. I mean, that to me is crazy. It's like, this is as realistic now as me flying, literally, apart from me sweating the whole time in a jet and not being able to drink tea. I get the same emotion from sitting in there, very similar emotion that I would do flying. And that to me that's why I can teach in there, by the way, and I can put the pressure on the guys. I can make them feel uneasy and concerned in a simulated environment. I find that weird. When 1985, what was I playing back then? Must have been some video games come out. I was about 10. Was it the Amstrad 6128 Micro B, BBC Micro B, wasn't it? So, and now we're doing this. That's crazy. Yeah, you know how those things work. And And then you think, well, America, how long's America been around? Look at what they've done. So I think when something new comes out, right, when a new bit of tech comes out, everyone piles in that tech. And I think that was the same how it was in the early 1900s with aviation. It was a new, bright thing. We'd never done this before. It was amazing. You get the best brains in it. And all of a sudden, technology ramps up, doesn't it? Things get lighter. And as you said, things get more compact and we're able to do more things. The early biplanes of the First World War were inherently fragile, by the way. We were still using balloons. The Zeppelins were flying over. Remember that American big bomber? What was that? I can't remember what it's called now, but it was a huge bomber that used to go. These things were delicate, but during the war they became a lot more robust. Towards the end of the war, with the Royal Flying Corps and all the investment going into it. But don't get me wrong, you still roll left in a sort of camel and it blew up or something. It was, if you looked at it the wrong way, it spun you into the ground and you died. And of course, it didn't have any. A lot of people didn't have parachutes. They didn't have harnesses necessarily or helmets. I mean. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? I mean, Bolker was one of Oswald Bolker, about 40 victories, died in 1916. He died on a survivable accident pretty much, but he wasn't wearing a helmet, wasn't wearing a seatbelt, legend. And Owen Boehm, I believe, was one of his prodigies, died about a year later, but he burned to death in flames. But these guys, I tell you what is interesting as well, I find and I don't know why, and I'm going to get spears for this, but I find the German side of the war more romantic than the actual British side. I don't know why. I do find it. And of course, when you think about German aces and things like this, especially in the Second World War, they tend to stay on the squadrons a lot longer, pretty much until they died. And so they have this huge tally rate, 300 victories, whereas we don't. We have a much lower one because we tend to roll our guys through a lot quicker. So, the development of the aircraft, I think, in the First World War was incredibly impressive. But you have to remember Kitchener at the very beginning of the war, if I'm not wrong, and I probably will be, and I probably am, when they proposed how many aircraft they were going to need to start manufacturing for the First World War, he doubled it. He went, well, let's just double it, because war in the air, I can't remember who said the quote, but he says, he who controls the air controls the battlefield. So they were like, and of course, these guys are rocking out the grenades in their pockets, aren't they? Going, grenade, over the side, have some darts, that kind of stuff. It's like, they're going up there. It started off with the pistols, wasn't it? Shooting each other with pistols.
I was say, people, I think they shoot horse pistols at each other. It's crazy, really, isn't it?
Have some of that. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, when you see footage, the surviving footage of World War I aerial combat, I mean, what do you think? Are you just like, that is insane to me? Or do you think it's so low speed, it's sort of child's play? Or what do you think when you see that sort of footage?
Well, you have to remember, so this is one of the things, is that the training for the guys, they didn't really know tactics. In fact, Bolker was the first person to write the Dicta Bolker, wasn't he? Which became the manual of aerial combat, flying with people like von Richthofen and his brother Lothar, and he got half the amount of kills as been his brother, didn't he, Manfred? But so these men were literally living it as they were doing it. They were learning it as they were doing it. So it wasn't as if you went through a flight school I taught on, like it's going to take you 5 years to be a fast jet pilot. And I ran the squadrons I was on was advanced flying training and tactical weapons. So I'd be teaching that, and the students would all get this syllabus. And if we were flying the syllabus and we thought we could do this a little bit better, we'd change it, and we'd microscopically we'd make it as best as we possibly could to give the greatest amount of value to the student. That never happened back then. They were like, mate, there's your white scarf and goggles. I'll spin the prop for you. Crack on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
Would you want to fly one of those things? Like, sorry.
No, go on. No.
Would you want to fly like a Sopwith Camel or one of even those pre-war things? Would you? Is that just a death trap as far as you're concerned? Would that be a great thing for you? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've got a mate who's an F-16 pilot in the States. He left flying a long time ago. It took him 10 years to get back in an airplane. He says to me, get back in an airplane when flying comes to you. You know what I mean? I know a friend of mine's John Peters, who lives up the road here from me. He's a lovely guy. He's the guy that ejected in the Gulf with John Nicole, you know what I mean, from the tornado.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was having dinner with him, with my wife and his wife, lovely. And I said, why didn't you carry on flying after the Gulf, John? And he was like, he did. He got in a light aircraft and it didn't really go anywhere. And he got a bit bored. And he realized when you're a professional pilot for 20 odd years, every day, 2 or 3 times a day, the sort of romanticism of flight goes a bit. It's a job. I don't want to be a dick about it. It's a job. And so it has to come back. You can't go and force aviation. You're like, I don't need to force it right now. I'm doing it virtually and I'm having a great time. And the people I fly with are lovely and they're learning a lot. And I'm grateful to have them. Don't get me wrong. But and I could see them developing in the way my students developed as well. And I get a lot back from that. But for me to go and sit in a little Cessna and go, I just don't need that right now. I said to my wife, we've got a place up in Anglesey when we were living there at Valley. It's a bungalow. It's just a small bungalow on a beach with a massive mortgage still on it. Strange enough, of course it is. They don't pay very much in the military, do they? I said to her, if we did have a little we got a little airfield across the road, not far from where we are. I said we could have an aircraft there to get airborne, to fly to the bungalow to land. The problem with that, of course, is the weather needs to be great. When you land it, you've got to taxi it in somewhere. There'd be no car, you know what I mean? It's just sitting there going, I might as well drive. You know, it's going to take me 4 hours anyway, and it takes me 4 hours in a car. It's probably going to take me 4 hours in a little aeroplane. So the only thing I would probably get back into is one of those little single or twin seat things, little tricycle undercarriage type job, tail draggery thing. Sorry, spin the prop, SE5A, something like that would be cool, wouldn't it? A little shot with camel, and just ferry myself around, go and land in fields and have a picnic and flashing the motor up again and get airborne. You know, that's
cool.
That's
cool. So it's not like I don't know, putting Lewis Hamilton in a golf cart and wondering why he's not enjoying himself. You is it that you actually like being in the sky, like because I used to know a guy who was a training to be a pilot, and the thing he would say a fair bit was that he just loved being up there. Didn't really matter what he was in or whether he was behind the controls or anything. He just loved being in the air. Does that relate to you at all, or is that
flip that a little bit, right? Because I hear that's a lot of the time. He doesn't like being on the ground. Is another way of looking at it.
Right.
So, you know, I don't want to be stupid about it, but pilots inherently are mavericks. They don't tend to get on with other people that much, and they tend to sit in their bedrooms playing with toys because they don't have any friends. I get it. You know what I mean? So I understand that. So what he's probably saying is, I better turn off. My boys are flying now. They're texting me. He's probably saying he loves getting away from it all. And think about what a maverick is. It's a separation from the crowd, isn't it? It's a guy that's guy or girl, sorry, because obviously we've got a lot of women that we train, but they tend to be an outlier, a bit against the grain. You know, I'm going to do this thing. Non-conformist is the word I'm looking for, isn't it? So he's probably, we get enough of this, don't we? This earth, you know, when you're up there, I'm not on Twitter reading rubbish, and I'm not, you know, I'm in the sky with a big scarf at the back here, like Snoopy. You know what I mean? You haven't got. Also, the thing about it is, I think people forget and don't seem to understand, which is the same as why people go and race cars. If you're racing a car, you ain't doing nothing else. If you're flying an airplane, it's exactly the same thing. You're just immersed in it, and that is meditation. That is mindfulness. You know what I mean? And I sometimes would get into the zone when I was flying. Sometimes flying really complicated sorties. I think the more complex it is, sometimes the more in the zone I got. And you realise that time passes and it's not a chore, and it's actually, you're just in there. And sometimes I could tell I'm fighting a student. He's in the zone. He's in his zone. I can tell he's in his zone. He's there. You know. And that's what I find quite interesting about it. And that's probably what he means is he's able to, you know, get up there. He's not down here. So all the worries are going away. It's why men have a shed, isn't it? I'm going to go to the shed.
Man shed, man cave.
Yeah.
Well, one of the last things I wanted to ask you just about before we sort of move on from World War One stuff was something I've always wanted to ask. You know, a military pilot, and you're the first person I've ever spoken to. But there's this idea, and basically my question is this complete bullshit, or does this sort of ring true to your mind? That those earliest pioneers, I suppose you'd say, that there was this sort of camaraderie between. They were sort of usually aristocratic or rich, sort of like early motor cars or early motor car racers were usually sort of the reserve of very rich sort of people, and that the early flyers, they had this thing like the Knights of the Sky. Yeah. That there was, you know, that idea, that concept. You probably, I'm sure you've heard about it. Does anything like that still exist today? I mean, would you feel a camaraderie with a Jordanian fast jet pilot or a Chinese fast jet pilot? You don't know them, but you've got that in common. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, absolutely do. Now, the thing is, when war starts and you're 1v0, just if we both survive, it's a massive bonus. But you're just trying to kill me, mate. I've got a family. Unfortunately, I've got to kill you too. And you'll do it with extreme prejudice as well. Whatever you can do, whatever tricks I can do, calling in everyone else on him, I don't care. He has to die because I want to go home. You know what I mean? It's a bit unfortunate, but that's why they pay me the massive amounts of money that they don't pay me. But I think, to be fair, yeah, I remember. I tell you a story right now. Okay. Well, actually, when Oswald Bolker died, I think he hit Irving Bohm. It ruined Irving Bohm for the next year. He was very upset that he killed his mentor. Was that correct? Yes. When the British found out about this, they flew over the airfield and they dropped a reef for him. And that was commonly done. They drive right over the airfield, have a reef. When some of these German pilots, I think it was von Richthofen's squadron, when they had a British pilot round, for dinner, a British that they captured. You know, they're all sitting there being very German. You know, drinking like Skoll, whatever they do. You know, I mean, getting the lagers in, and as they did back in the First World War, getting the lagers in, obviously. They had this guy come around. He sat there and he was chatting to them, and then he said, "I'm going to have to use the bathroom," and he went off. And they all kind of watched him to see if he was going to escape. But he didn't. He came back and he said, "Well, I'm not going to escape. You guys have provided such nice hospitality." So there was that, and there still is that, to be fair. I speak to pilots all over the world with fast ship performance. A lot of pilots write to me from very many different air forces that we're not necessarily friendly with as such or trading with. But I'm not in the military anymore, you know what I mean? I'm a British guy, happy to help out people. And when people leave, they contact me as well. I remember I was buying aircraft when I first left the military. I was buying some Czechoslovakian aircraft, some fast jets, and I was out in Prague. There was a company there. I eventually went to their airfield to buy them, and we were getting the big sell, you know what I mean? This company I won't mention, but there was a business director trying to tell me how wonderful these airplanes were, how they were definitely going to suit what I needed them for, about 12 of them, all fast jets. And I'd done my reading, and I kind of knew a bit, you know, I knew roughly what was going on. And I said, is there any chance of speaking to one of the pilots who flies this airplane? And the business director was like, yep. I'll grab you this guy. And they grabbed this young guy in. And the guy said, "Do you want to go for coffee?" You know, in his broken English. So we left this business development briefing that this guy was ex-Czech Air Force. He's just finished flying this particular aircraft for the Czech Air Force, and now he was flying with this company. Went for a coffee, and he sat down. He said, he goes, "I know what you want the aircraft for." He says, "I'm a pilot. You're a pilot. I can't lie to you. There are some things about it that aren't going to be suitable. So let's chat it out." I mean, you know, I'm like, let's chat it out. And now because he did that, and because I could see the honesty that was coming out of it, because he's pilot versus pilot, right? Different Air Force and that stuff. I was like, no, okay, I think I can still work with that. We can make this work. You know what I mean? So there is that camaraderie, yeah. And a lot of pilots will say, no, there isn't, and they're idiots, because of course there is, because they're all just kids. Go look at the sky, going, "I want to fly jets, right? I want to fly helicopters. I want to fly big airplanes." That's all we are. And then we have to join the military to do that. And then we get a bit wrapped up in the nationalism and the flag waving and the parades, and we all know they're there for a reason, don't we? It's to keep us all, you know, the medals. Why do they give medals? It's so I keep coming into work every day. I get it. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not anti-medal. I am a little bit. But so, yeah, in short, pilots are just big kids, haven't grown up yet, and they don't want to.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I can only imagine that, you know, that's sort of a part of the mindset needed, as you said, like Mavericks, or I've heard you talk in other videos about, well, at length, in all sorts of aspects of sort of the psychology or the personality required. And it seems, you know, quite a specific set of qualities. Well, that was actually something I wanted to ask you about towards the end, but I'll ask you now. The idea of personality versus just ability. So I was watching something about the very early sort of test stuff in the 50s and 60s. Anyway, they were talking about the selection process for that. And they were saying they didn't care one jot about your personality. All they cared about was your ability, your record in planes. That was it. But I've heard you talk about quite a lot that you need to sort of fit in, or I've watched documentaries about selection for the Red Arrows and things. A lot of it is about you have to fit into a team. You have to be one of the lads a bit. What do you think about that?
Well, the Navy SEALs have got quite an interesting thing where when they select for their SEAL Team 6, which is their special forces thing, they don't take the guy with the most ability. They take the guy that's most trustful. And they have this trust thing where they have a guy, you know, this guy's much more capable of this guy, but I trust this guy a lot more. You know what I mean? He's right. And I get that. And I think in flying as well, you know, I've been in valleys and tornadoes with navigators at night with night vision goggles on, people chasing us, shooting us down. You trust those people not to fly into you, you know? My wife flew with one of my pilots, and I don't think I was a hugely popular guy. I think all pilots are a bit of kind of like lions, you know, we're just a bunch of lions put in the same room, trying not to fight each other, you know, because we're all trying to keep our statuses. So pilots don't tend to have friends. You come out of the service and it's like, oh, my friends are phoning me up from. No, they don't. A lot of people have a go at me because I'm on doing this stuff, and I think I've got an ego, and I don't think I have, but I just like talking about stuff, you know. And I think it's important to talk about stuff for the younger generation. Well, just for the younger generation, isn't it? I'll let them get into it as well more than anything. But I think, yeah, I don't really know, to be fair, or do I know? I don't. I think personality does. I think personality is a lot more important than skills. The aircraft we fly now, we purposely don't need to train in the same way to fly them. The F-35 Typhoon. Tornado was a bit different because it was a bit more mandrolic. You had to move levers and stuff. And then the aircraft I teach in DCS, I purposely have an F5 in there, Northrop F5, because it's a hard aircraft to fly. But I also have an F-18 next to it because it's an easy aircraft to fly. But the F-18 is complicated to operate, and the F5 is easy to operate. It's just so I've got both aircraft, and I demand the men and women in there to fly both, because and they when they get on the F5, they're like, oh, this is amazing. Well, I hate it to start off with, and eventually they're like, now I'm doing this, I'm doing circuits in it, and I'm mastering it. I'm doing formation in it. It's amazing. And I brought a young guy back the other day. He's only 17, on my wing, into a straight and approach in the F5, and he's on the wing and I'm looking at him like I would do for real in flying training, and he's learned to stay in formation with me. It's just experienced it over a period of time. In the Hornet, it's a bit different. So yeah, in the 50s and 60s, I understand why they did that. But if you look at Neil Armstrong, he was not necessarily a popular guy. He was very much a man of his own mind. He liked his own thing. And if you looked at Chuck Yeager, the guy was disliked by most people, and I probably would dislike him as well. I think Jeremy Clarkson went to interview him, and when he died, unfortunately, recently, Jeremy Clarkson wrote in the Times and said, didn't like the guy. Fair play. Did a lot of good stuff. Didn't like him. He was rude and arrogant, and didn't like him. I guess some pilots are.
Or maybe it's that thing like a race driver. You sort of have to. Well, you correct me if I'm wrong. You have to be sort of the centre of your universe. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess you kind of have to be that because it's all on you, isn't it? I mean, most people I think walk through life. I mean, my life certainly I could say, very rarely, if ever, what I do in the next second or two, other people's and my life depends on it. That just doesn't come up. So. To be at ease with that, not just do it once or twice, but to be at ease with that. Like I was watching, I'm fascinated by the figure of Chuck Yeager. Yeah, he seemed like a bit of an arsehole, but I'm fascinated by him and interviews by him and stuff. And the number of times he said, yeah, this happened or that happened, or like my canopy ripped off at 2.4 Mach 2.4 or something. Things like that. And he's super chilled about it. And most people, that's just pure. It would be a pure overload. Like my mind would just be drowned in terror if something like that happened to me. But I've watched a fair bit of you doing VR and the real thing, in the GR4s. But one of the things you said when you was doing some VR stuff on the GR1, you're saying you're weirded out by how accurate the VR is. That it just feels like the real thing. And of course, I've got no concept. A normal person like me could never judge that. But it is really good. It's great stuff to watch. Really great stuff to watch.
The funny thing about that was I literally jumped in that jet with my check cards and gone, roughly remember what's going on here, see if I can get the engine started. And I'd put real weather on, real weather for Lossiemouth, not knowing what the weather was that day, not having a clue. And of course, I flew out of RAF Lossiemouth, which I've flown out with. That's where I was based on the jet for about 4 years. And so I got airborne, running away with the jet, and then turned right, Inverness, turned left, Great Glen, looking for the Loch Ness Monster. And I was back into that zone. Initially, it was a bit like, there's a lot happening on this jet. There's a lot more on this jet than there is in the Hawk. So let's just square it away. Let's get the processes going. Right, I'm back in now. I've got it. I'm happy. I can think more ahead now. I know what I need to do. And when I went into the Great Glen, I managed to get in under the weather. And that's what we did for real. Low cloud base, top of hills, you can't see. And it did feel like I was back in the jet under VR, and I narrated it. And that's a lot of guys write to me about that video. And it's a sim video, but it's me talking about what I'm thinking of doing. Yeah. But you're right. I've lost lots of friends. People have. And everyone I lost was in control of the aircraft when they were killed. They were in control of the aircraft when they were killed. And that's quite difficult to understand sometimes. What they did contributed to their death. I'm not there's no blame. God, people tend to die when something happens that they haven't got a plan for. And that's the same in City World, by the way. You don't think you're going to die that morning and then a bus hits you. You're like, okay, I can't plan for everything, but I didn't think of buses. So same. That's what we do in flying. We talk about the what ifs in the brief, and the what ifs are like, what if? Am I missing something? And then someone goes, yeah, hang on a second. What if this happens? And we're like, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. It's happened before loads of times where the youngest person in a brief for a formation has brought up something like, guys, have we thought about this? And in fact, that happened on the SEAL Team 6 mission to go and kill Osama bin Laden. Someone said, we haven't briefed what happens if a helicopter crashes. And they went, all right, stop the brief. No, we haven't, have we? All right, let's write a plan for this. Let's brief it. A helicopter crashed. They hadn't briefed that. They hadn't thought about it. And that was one of the young SEALs going, what if we lose a helicopter? And they did. So So yeah, and the problem is though, and I'll be square with you away now, Bo, because this is, it's a marriage issue. It doesn't end when you leave. A pilot is always thinking in the future. It's hard to be in the now. Like, being in the now is uncomfortable for me. Yet being in the now is the most healthy thing you can be. Living in the future is horrible and pointless, and you never appreciate the moment. And in a marriage, that's quite a difficult thing. So when you come out, you need to do some work on that. You need to get yourself together. You need to grab your wife or your husband and say, right, I've been in a position for the last 20 years where my actions could contribute towards my death or death of other people that had families and everything. You know what I mean? So both enemy and our side. I need to do some work on that. You know what I mean? And so I've done some work on it. I continue to work every day on it, and I think it's very positive to do that. Yeah.
Well, this was something. I mean, this isn't live, so I can edit it out. And do stop me if I'm saying asking anything too sort of personal or intrusive or anything. But while we're here, I mean, I have heard you say that you've lost people who you considered a better pilot than you.
Yeah.
And that messes with your brain. Like, this guy was better than me, and he came. But one thing I wanted to ask you about. I'm watching a video, one of your videos. Real life, you're in I can't remember actually if you're in a tornado or a hawk, but anyway, you're behind and you're flying down Lake Windermere, sort of 400 odd knots, under 250 feet. I guess, as you say, you get used to it because it's your day job and things. But to me, are you not sort of petrified of a bird strike? I mean, can you eject at 400 knots? I mean, you can, okay. But I mean, what's the ground speed, just roughly, at 400?
420 knots is about 500 miles an hour. It's like a 1.14 knot to mile per hour or something. So, I mean, it's relative, isn't it? It'll mess you up, by the way. An ejection at 400 knots is better than death, but only just.
Right.
It's going to mess you. You're going to have flail injuries and broken arms and stuff.
Yeah, it's not going to be fun. I mean, the thing I wanted to ask is that sort of thing, and that's just that's just a practice training flight, wasn't it? That one, for example. But you are taking, it's all managed risk, I suppose you could say. But it's still relatively high levels of it. And I've heard people that do, extremely dangerous things like road racing, either man TT, that things that you're on the raggedy edge of dying. Let's be frank. They call it sort of the space between. You're somewhere between life and death in a way. It's and I wanted to ask you again, if it's not too intrusive to ask, is that a big pull for you, even if it's subconscious, even if it's not in the front of your mind when you're doing these things? But is that part of it? You learn to love that, or addicted to that very real danger, or is that something that you have to push aside and try and forget? I mean,
I don't miss it, if that's what you mean.
Right. Okay.
I might help. I don't miss it. I'll do it again tomorrow. I probably wouldn't do it. That's
a contradiction, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, well, it is calculated risk, and I felt I was better than death. Right. I was marginally.
Yeah, sure.
Some of my friends weren't. Death is quite cunning sometimes, it seems. And some of the people that we thought were some of the best pilots and the safest pilots, unfortunately, end up being killed. And I'm not a big guy. I get accused of using that for some reason. I'm like, no, it affects you. It does affect you. And it was stupid, and I wish I hadn't. But in 2011, I came back and did an investigation into a Red Arrow's crash, and I knew the Red Arrow who died. I knew his wife, and I said to the boss, I don't want to do it. This is ridiculous. I just come back from Afghan. And the boss said, we haven't got anyone else, like in an Air Force that big. And I've just come back from Afghan. We didn't miss it when I was in Afghan, did you? You know what I mean? So I had to go and do this investigation. And it was probably horrible. It was pretty horrible, actually, to be fair, to do that work on a friend of yours. You shouldn't do that. You know what I mean? And then, unfortunately, I was there with another friend, a really good guy, actually, that everyone loved. And they loved both these guys, don't get me wrong. And I was there the morning he was killed up at Scampton as well in the Red Arrows. You know what I mean? And on an accident that shouldn't have happened. It was a maintenance accident, unfortunately. So, and that's just like more baggage. And then eventually got to 20 years. And I'm like, I'm sort of done with this career now. I've done 20 years of it. You know what I mean? I think 20 years is probably a bit unhealthy. Get out earlier, but you carry it. Race drivers carry it. But I remember David Coulthard saying recently, he was being offered some drive, not a competition race or anything, but like a drive. And he's like, no, I'm done. I'm not a race car driver anymore. I'm a commentator. That side of life is over. I get that, that side of my life is over. Now, the silly thing is, I'm in a company building designing and building hopefully a flying training aircraft, which is a modular one based on sort of modular aircraft, aviation, so it's commercial aircraft designs such as Airbus and things like this, which makes it a lot cheaper. And of course, I'll have to fly that. I'll have to teach the CEO to fly that as well. And I will get back in the airplane, but it won't be the same. I won't be down valleys at night time on goggles being chased by other aircraft who are trying to, shoot me down. It's a young man's game,
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. I mean, sorry?
Young person's game,
Yeah.
sorry.
I can totally see it. Well, it's funny, that's sort of the question I was asking about, sort of being on that raggedy edge or being addicted to the very dangerous thing. You say about David Coulthard, there's sort of the opposite, like Eddie Irvine and Johnny Herbert are sort of famous for they'll drive anything.
Yeah,
you let them into any race car or sports car, they're there. So, but yeah, I mean, God, I can only just imagine that, if you sort of feel like you've dodged a bullet in a way, you'll be tempting fate. There's a thing I've heard. It's interesting actually. I heard Lewis Hamilton once say about when Alonso went and did IndyCar. Lewis Hamilton said, "No, that's crazy." Oh no, it was Christian Horner said something like, "You've got to have rocks in your head to do the Indy 500. You're kidding me? A concrete wall and those speeds? No, that's insane." And so even people that are used to taking crazy risks, that their envelope is still quite small. Anyway, I don't want to keep asking you about risk.
Nico Rosberg, didn't he? When Nico Rosberg was driving for Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton back in 2016, he won the World Championship, didn't he? And immediately he left. Yeah. I remember Lewis said something about this, and at the time I thought Lewis was bang out of order, but now I understand what he means. Lewis is as Asperger's as the rest of us, you know what I mean? He's on that scale. We all are, we're all on that scale somewhere. I think all men are on that scale, aren't they? You know what I mean? And then some women, but mainly men are on that kind of, especially pilots, especially race drivers. And he said, well, of course he's left. He's won his world championships, got family. Why would he come back in? And, he won't come back in. I remember thinking that's a bit harsh. But Lewis is black and white. He's just black and white, isn't he, with what he says? I mean, he's a polarizing figure. But he's done so much to change the sport. I like the guy personally. I know people don't. I couldn't care less. I don't believe their dislike about him is about racism at all. I think that's just being thrown around by the media because the media are idiots. They're trying to generate some hate, aren't they? Which is what the media does. I think they don't like him because he's a successful Briton. And we tend to bring Britain people. We like building them up and tearing them down. Look at Britain's Got Talent. That's what we always do. So, I see what Nico Rosberg did. And he's kind of like, I'm done with it. I'm fine. Happy. Done it. You know what I mean? Whereas you're right. Some people carry on. I suppose I get that risk in other places, don't I? You expose yourself to ridicule by having a YouTube channel. I do exactly the same thing. I've got a YouTube channel, I've got a podcast and everything. I go on there sometimes and people write hateful things. That's a buzz for me, because you realise that in order to do anything positive, you're going to have negative people around you. You just are. It's like if you're not sitting on the fence, someone is going to call you out. I bet people write in the comments for your stuff some hateful things sometimes, like, oh, actually, this person was... Yeah, I'm sure they were. It's just what they do. And I think race drivers... And pilots is the same kind of thing. It's that kind of buzz. So you'll go and do something else and you'll find it in another way. It doesn't really go away. I had it, went away for a couple of years. And then I went, actually, I'm going to go and train people to fly airplanes and get a bit of that back again. And I'm going to double down with the YouTube channel and a bit of, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, I think it's there somewhere. I think it's there with a lot of people. Just a lot of people aren't race drivers or, a lot of people go, well, actually, I'll go and ride horses or something. Horses are dicks, aren't they? Horses will kill you in a second. They'll roll over.
One of the ones that springs to mind, I'm a huge fan. One of my all-time heroes is Jackie Stewart, and the way he, obviously it's a different era, vastly more dangerous in the 60s and early 70s. But the way he walked away, he said, "Look, literally, I'm done. Yeah, this is insane."
I've got away with it for long enough.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about it's a variant on a question I've already asked you, but it's a bit different. But the World War II era dogfights, gun cam footage.
Yeah,
I'm sort of fascinated by that stuff. It's very macabre. I mean, it's
it is what it is, isn't it?
It's snuff footage, really. I mean, you're watching people die, and yet it's compelling. I mean, I think a lot of people that are interested in history are interested by sort of the extremes of the human experience. I mean, and there's nothing much more intense than sort of World War II gun cam footage. And I wonder two things, like, are you appalled when you see that sort of thing? Can you sort of not really watch it? Or is it fascinating to you in that sort of way? And the other thing is it of any use to sort of a modern late 20th century, early 21st century fighter pilot? Is it of any use to watch that sort of stuff? Would it actually help in real world situations, in dogfighting and stuff?
Well, if you get into a dogfight nowadays, you've done something very wrong.
Right.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, don't get me wrong. When I say that, is a lot of the, because sometimes you will end up in it. You just will. Like you'll meet a Russian aircraft over Syria that's just bombed a small town. You'll be an F-18 and you'll throw the most high-tech missile at him, which will just go off somewhere to the moon for some reason, and you'll throw another one and it will hit him. And that is rare. Super rare. What's really going to happen is there's going to be targets coming over the horizon at 60, 70 miles, and you're going to be up at 50 or 60,000 feet in your F-22 or your F-35 launching rockets. Have one of these missiles, mate. I don't ever want to get into a dogfight. These aircraft aren't designed for that anymore. They're not the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s aircraft, that the F-16s, the F-15s. That's not what they're for anymore. The F-18 high alpha, high off bore sight. We're looking at data, and we're looking at off-board sensors and network-enabled capabilities and all these kind of things. So if I'm doing that stuff, I'm probably not watching World War II gun cam footage. That said, there's a lot to learn about humanity by watching those things, and there always is. And I'm a fan of that, because it's very difficult for us to understand when we're not in conflict what people do when they are. You're a historian, you know this, of course. There are some horrible things people do, and you look back on that and you say, that was a horrible thing you did, and you don't realize that the reason they did that was because it was probably happening to them and they had to. I mean, Eric Hartman is a guy that I thought had a very interesting career. I mean, I think he had something 345 kills, mainly. I think it was higher. I think it was 352, of which 345 were Soviet aircraft. German ace. He's renowned as being the world's greatest ace pilot, Eric Hartman. And I do a lot, I don't read into him, but I read into people like this, and I think, what was their life like? Like Manfred von Richthofen, his life was very simple. He's a very simple man, Doesn't mean you have to be a simple man to be that good. Well, no, because he used to shoot down the most junior, newest pilots on squadrons. That's exactly what he did. That's how he got his kill rate up. His brother, Lothar, for example, I think he lied about shooting. Who did he shoot at? It was Albert Ball. He didn't shoot Albert Ball down. Albert Ball crashed when they think his engine stalled or something. And Lothar came back and went, yeah, I shot him down, just shot him down. And everyone went, hang on a second, mate, I don't think that's true. So, what is that about? What is it that makes people do these things? Well, it's desperation for a lot of it, isn't it? And so watching those things for me makes me realise that we're in a better time, and that I'm ever so grateful for that. But also there are times that are horrendous. I mean, your history, when you go through it, people don't realise that when you're talking about people, over 200, 300 years ago, you're talking about people whose life expectancy was very short, and their dental hygiene was exceptionally poor, and they're living with disease, and they're living with these things, and we're judging them on today's standards because we're idiots. We're like, how could Henry VIII done it? Well, hang on a second, he had a massive wound for most of it. I mean, it's that kind of. So, and I do a lot of this, by the way. I do a lot of this, like, well, hang on, why do we think it from the other side? So if we want to understand, like, why Germany went to war, why are we looking at it from a Western perspective? Let's flip that around and go, I am now German. What's happening? What's inflation like in my country? What's my life like every day? Oh, Hitler's promising me the earth. Oh, he's telling me everything's going to be great. Oh, that's interesting. I support him now. People don't understand that. They just go, oh, Hitler was a really bad man. It was like, I'm sure he wasn't a saint, don't get me wrong, but he was trying to bring Germany back on its feet. I'm going to get told off now for supporting Hitler. This is where it goes, Bo. Honestly, it goes this. I'm not supporting Hitler. Oh, my God, there are such idiots out there. Oh, we've got to be able to think critically and teach our children to think critically. If we can't do it, the world is going to end. But it's very interesting when you turn that. You're like, why is this pilot shooting at that airplane? What is it? Well, the airplane's just shot his mate down and bombed London, for crying out loud. And he's had Zeppelins over, what I mean? So, and he also, if he doesn't shoot, he gets shut down himself. Yeah, and it is brutal. And I remember Irving Boehm, I think, when he died, they were firing tracer rounds at him, and his whole cockpit went up. And I think one of the pilots said, I saw the German pilot looking down at the ground because he was, on fire. And then the cockpit just filled up with flames and smoke, and he obviously burnt to death as he went down. That's pretty horrific, isn't it? You've got to get up tomorrow and you've got to go do it again, by the way. You've got to go kill someone else, having just seen a pilot that, by the way, you're sitting in a very similar aircraft to him. That could happen to you. But can you go and kill some more people? It's in our minds, we can't comprehend it. We're not in that total war experience. So I always try and have a look at that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, fascinating stuff. I mean, I've heard you talk about a fair bit of sort of the psychology or the pathology or sort of the mind space
Yeah,
is very different. I heard you sort of say that, when you were in or when you were sort of actively flying, you were a lot more fierce or you had a lot more anger in you, and that was, that was the point. You had to. That wasn't bad. That
yeah,
was sort of, that fighter pilots, you say you're looking for a fight. Very sort of fierce warrior type mentality in some ways, or at least to be sort of a normal civvy, you need to sort of dial it back a bit. Is that
yeah.
fair to say?
I think you've hit a nail on the head there. I've done a lot of work on this, leaving the military, a lot of work, and that's why I won't go. I wouldn't be able to go back in because I'm not that guy anymore. You know what I mean? Guys are wired tight in the military, right? They're wired tight. They'll flash up at you. They will. If you piss a fighter pilot off, you're going to get it back. A lot of people like me back then, I guess, were looking for debate, discourse, abrasive discourse, maybe. And we weren't that well educated. Knew a lot about fighter jets. Didn't know a lot about anything else. But then I started writing about stuff in around about 2013, 14 on the website. Air Force hated that, of course, hated it. Because I'm saying, hang on a second, are we doing the right thing here, guys? Because we're pilots, but there must be a bit more going on. I hated it anyway, and it started looking at pilot psychology, and I'm interested in that. I'm interested from when we've really started thinking about it, because there's a reason. All pilots are the same, by the way. We're literally within half or percent wise of being the same. I'll tell you why, because, okay, so since the age of 8, we've looked up in the sky and got, oh, airplanes, they look pretty, I want to fly those. Okay, tick, most of us did that, majority did that. We joined air cadets, we've gone to university, we've got the same qualifications, mainly engineering based, or science, or physics based or something. Then we've gone, I want to be in the military, so we've self-selected, okay? We looked at what does it take, who's in the military, what's Tim like, how can I be as good looking as that guy? We want facial hair and stuff, So I've got, okay, so I'm gonna have to grow a massive beard or whatever it is. So you've looked at guys, you've got some mentors maybe, and you've gone, okay, so I think I fit that mold of joining the military. I'll apply, and then the military goes, okay, I'll see whether you fit the club, because I know what people are in the military already, and I'll see whether you're going to fit in. And then it selects you. So when you go in, you are in the same people, and it makes it quite boring, to be fair, with hindsight now. You're flying with guys who are all the same, and you realise that after about 15 years, and you decide to leave. But they're very good at doing one very well disciplined thing, and it takes a lot of energy to do it, and you're glad they do it like that, because if they didn't, more people would crash and die, and we wouldn't be able to protect the country. So so I guess that's it really. I think that's
One thing I wanted to ask you about before we sort of move on from the World War II era, are you a lot of people have got sort of a fixation with the Spitfire, the Supermarine. I wonder if, again, as a kid, lots of boys, that was sort of their thing. Have you fetish is a wrong word, but some people just love World War II era planes, don't they? Fighter planes. And I wonder if you've got that, or it's not a particular interest for you, or it's like you've always loved the Spitfire, or what?
Got a Spitfire fetish? No, I haven't. No.
No.
No, I was more of a Hurricane fan, to be fair, because
Right.
it could be fixed. I'm a bit of a utilitarian kind of guy. I mean, the Tornado was a bit of a brute of an aircraft. He wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, but we loved her because a missile could fly into her and bounce off type. She's a bit of a huge warfighting machine. And the Hurricane you could fix quite easily. It was a different material sort of thing, So I like the Hurricane. No, I like the Mosquito made of wood. Quite cool, kind of craft work. No, it's just I'm not a fetish about that stuff. I know guys flying the Battle of Britain memorial fighters and stuff, and they're one of them's a friend of mine now. It's not like I'm running up there to have a look around them. Right. I think those aircraft weren't supposed to survive the length of time they have. They're supposed to survive a few months. Right. We've just kept them alive. No, I don't fetishize about that stuff. I'm more interested in the individuals in the Second World War than the actual equipment they use. My dad was very much into it. My dad ran a group called the Military Vehicle Conservation Trust back in the day. Now it's called the Military Vehicle Trust. He was secretary for it, and he had a BSA M20 motorcycle that he picked up from Malta. He was a Royal Marine, and he did it back in Royal Marine colours as if it would have been used with the Desert Rats and stuff like that. And he used to ride around in uniform, and one of those guys that reenacts. He didn't reenact anything, but they used to go and show this stuff. And I used to go to these shows and see all these vehicles, travel around in tanks and stuff. And I understand keeping that alive. I do. But it's not like he loved his bike. That was one bike. That could have been a Harley Davidson in the Second World. That could have been, you know what I mean? It's just trying to keep something alive. So I like people that are into that. I really am. I do like that. I like the enthusiasm they have. But I do think there's a difficulty sometimes with romanticizing things like this. We forget about other things that are really important. And it's not just these airplanes. I mean, you know about this as well, but we forget about the death, and that's happening because the Spitfire is so pretty, and big V12. So, but hang on, a lot of people are dying, kids, and it's. But I get it. I understand now that that's not happening, and we can celebrate these things. As I said, I'm a bit of a Germanophile, and some of the things when I talk to Germans, they say, you're still holding on to the Second World War, and I'm like, well, hang on a second. If we're holding on to it, you guys as well, because you're not committing your troops anywhere that I can see. You know what I'm saying? It's like, how about you get over yourself, start flying your flags again, and get back to being Germany that we knew and loved. You know what I mean? But because we do love Germany. We're not hot on France so much, but we do love Germany as Englanders,
Oh no, they're our cousins or brothers.
Yeah,
even.
The royal family is made. Yeah, exactly. So it's
no more brother wars is a saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a bit about sort of the advent of the jet engine, sort of that period, sort of right at the end of World War II and going into sort of the Cold War period, and again, that figure of Chuck Yeager, where sort of straddling that period, because he was a pilot in World War II, shot down I think 5 109s in one day one time, and he was survived behind enemy lines. Not his story is sort of, you can't quite believe his life story, but in the 50s, sort of these experimental stuff, like the X1, breaking the sound barrier for the first time, and sort of altitude records and all sorts of stuff. And I just wondered what you make of it, just in general, of sort of Chuck Yeager and other men like him. He wasn't the only guy doing this stuff. There's a few different guys, and just that whole period of when like the U2 and that SR-71 Blackbird and all that sort of period, where a lot of things were done for the first time. Well, for example, just the SR-71. Most pilots will wax lyrical about that. What do you think about it?
It's a big, long black airplane and goes really fast.
Right, you don't like sort of romanticize it as this pinnacle of engineering.
Have a look at the. Oh no, I do. The fact that when it's on the ground it leaks and everything, I love all that stuff. But you look at the cockpit, and you're like, that is a mess. I've got to work out some dials here. It's not like a pilot-friendly cockpit. It's like that scan is difficult. No, don't get me wrong. I think it's fantastic. It was the YF 32, is it? I think when it first came out, I can't remember now. I might be lying. I can't remember. It was designed as an experimental fighter, and of course that's never going to work. So they made it into this hugely successful reconnaissance airplane, very expensive at the time, of course. But no, stuff like that is interesting. These are when I follow Boom Aerospace in the States because I'm with a company called Aerolith, and Boom are doing a commercial version of a high-speed Concorde type thing that they want to use. We're doing a flying training aircraft, and sometimes we meet and chat. You know what I mean? At air shows and things like that. Or we did when the whole bug wasn't going around. And I'm very interested in what they're doing and the technologies they're using. And so pilots will, I remember like a lot of pilots wanted to fly a Harrier, and I'd love to have flown Harrier, to be fair, because I wanted to do that hovering bit. And then when you meet Harrier mates in the bar, all our mates, we went through flying training with them. So when I was going through flying training, we had the option of Tornado GR4 Sea Harrier, which then got decommissioned, GR7, which then became GR9 Harrier, Air Force Harrier, Jaguar, Buccaneer had gone, obviously, and F3, of course. And you sort of picked your favourite, and hopefully you got a slot on it. And all people wanted to fly Jaguar because they wanted to know what the curvature of the Earth was like, because it took so long to get airborne on its underpowered engines, and it could only carry one bomb. But there's a tight little cockpit. Love to have done that, single seat. And then all the rest of us wanted to fly Harrier as well, because you get to do that novel viff thing and go up and down, and that sounds inherently dangerous, and let's give that a go. And then all the Harrier mates, when we all meet up, they always want to fly Tornado because we had the terrain following radar that would fly the jet down to 200 feet up to about 600 miles an hour by itself in cloud. That's a pretty scary thing to do. So there's and it had swing wings and fire came out the back, and it was it's a Tornado. It's brilliant. Love that airplane. So everyone wants to fly. Everyone's got an interest. And I meet F-16 guys. I'm like, what's it like to have that side stick? And they're like, yeah, it doesn't even move. It's amazing. But we haven't got any fuel. I'm like, oh, that's sad. You haven't got any fuel. Okay. And then you meet like an F-15 dude. You're like, what? That plane is massive. He goes, yeah, the walk around takes about 2 days just to check everything's in place. And I get in, I'm like, this massive jet on me, 2 massive engines. And you're like, that's because you meet them when you're in theatre, when you're at war, of course. You know what I mean? You sit around with, and they've got an F-15 patch, so you go and sit with them. And they're like, oh, you're a Tornado, mate. You're like, yeah, you're F-15, mate. Yeah. Have a chat, and you do exchanges. I never did any, but mates of mine did. That's why I teach on the Hornet now, because it's got this huge alpha thing, and the guys are like, I don't know what I'm doing with the Hornet. And I'm like, right, let's talk about drag, and let's talk about alpha, and let's talk about. So every aircraft has got something unique about it. F-86, I've got that on this game, and I learned about that starting it up. And the engine start process on the F-86 was so volatile. You had to sort of put 3% RPM in and then get the fuel flow, and then another 3%. If you messed up, the thing exploded. It didn't explode, it didn't start. But and that was like the first aircraft really get into jet aviation. And I love it. It's fascinating. It's a rocket ship, that thing, but the startup is like, this thing's just trying to kill me with the complicated levers. So, and that's what gets me back into flying now, is flying these pretend airplanes in Simland. But every aircraft has got something unique and special about it. And I think that's what it makes it interesting, isn't it? It's like watches. I like watches now because I think watches are where engineering meets aesthetic and engineering meets design. And coming out of the military, I realised actually I've got a quite creative brain on me. It's been a bit suppressed, strange enough, because conformity, such as in the military, doesn't allow you to. Right. It's like, who'd have known? Right. So I'm now into design and architecture, and I love all that stuff now. But in the military, I didn't even think about it. So yeah, so there's some interesting. So those aircraft, I do appreciate. I do like them. And I do read about them sometimes. But then again, I was reading about the Huey the other day, the helicopter. That thing was a little workhorse, and you kind of get yourself into this whole loop, don't you? F-104. I mean, Phantom. I love the Phantom. F4. I love polyhedral wings, anhedral tailplane. Love that stuff. Rolls-Royce Spey engines. Lightning, of course. Would I have flown Lightning? If I was drunk enough, probably. I'd have to really get myself smashed up to get in that thing. You know what I mean?
Well, can I ask you very quickly while we're on this? The F-117, the original stealth one. Would that be? Is that sort of a pinnacle of someone's career, or is that sort of a bit?
No, that would
gauche,
be. That would be pinnacle. The best pilots. Okay, if you really want to know where the best pilots are, and I'm not making this up, they're sitting in an F-22 cockpit, right? They're just sitting in
the gold standard, right? The F-22.
The what? Sorry.
It's just the gold standard at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, these guys. If you speak to these guys, they're probably going to step out of that jet into like an astronaut program, right? I'm not. Right. They just are. They just. I met an F-22 pilot at Valley. I was showing him around. He was just come look at the flying training system because he was running one of the ones in the States, and we had the new flying training system, and we were pretending it was working when it wasn't. But that's another thing. But he came over and he had an F-22 patch on. I said, I've never seen that. I said, what's that? What's going on? He goes, oh, stop flying it now. He was in his, he's about a bit older than me, and he was 40s and I was late 30s. I said, you stopped flying it? He goes, yeah. He goes, I was flying it, and I was on one sortie. I was running the base where so if you're a base commander, you can fly aircraft on your base, I'm on a sortie with these young guys and girls, very intelligent. And it got to the point where I'm actually actively targeting things that are behind me. And I'm like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. And he stopped flying it. It was like, these guys' brains work at a different kind of alien level. Wow. So that's cool. And they're good people to speak to and stuff. And I like, I think, I don't know why I think Americans get a bad rap. I really like them. But these guys are special. So there are aircraft like that. F-35 I would have liked to have played with. But I know F-35 pilots that have left the service already. Because I'm not saying it's a soulless jet. It's different. It's different now. It's not polling skills. It's management skills of different systems, offloading things, bringing different sensors in. And I think that's quite interesting personally. But some people would rather throw jets around valleys. I did a lot of that. And so I'm ready. I was ready for the next thing. But
the F-35's got a vertical takeoff capability, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's just V-style one, because you'd be heavy when you're getting airborne in that thing. You can press up like that, but it's heavy. There were 3 variants, of course, weren't there? And our variants are the sort of pushy up ones. Technical term, pushy up. But so they come back into the hover for the deck. But it's a button you press and it does itself. I think it's great. Why would you not want that to happen? And then you can sort of land it a little bit. But you always get airborne off the ramp on the 2 carriers because you're heavy. You use a lot of fuel on board and bombs and stuff.
So you're not of the mind. I've heard other pilots say the vertical takeoff thing, at least in the Harrier, is sort of needlessly dangerous or overly difficult to master. What are your feelings on that?
How do you mean? Like they would never get airborne on a sortie vertically because they'll be too heavy, and to fly like that means you've got to put a lot of water into the engine. To increase the thrust of it. So you're carrying a lot of water, and that's weight, and everything's about weight. But coming back to land, if they're light enough, then they can hover. What these pilots think of saying is, why bother when you've got a long runway? And I get that. I think also, in the Harrier pilots I knew, they used to spend a lot of time practicing these circuits like lots of time practicing, coming back to the circuit to do a hover transition circuit, which is complicated, nuanced, nozzle, flap in the right order. You know, you've got to make sure water has to come on at a certain time. Now you've got 90 seconds of terror before that runs out. Why bother? Your fuel's running low. Why bother? It's a skill like anything else. It's like, why do tornadoes carry on flying low level? Well, because it was fun. I remember actually I remember at Valley when I was on the Hawk T1 teaching on that. And, you know, you're in your bubble and you're all kind of like super instructor guy, changing the world. You know, you don't know any different really. I was a young man at the time. So very idealistic. And I remember going up to the boss, I think it was, and saying to the boss, why are we still flying low level, like attacks and stuff when everything's happening up top? Why are we still? And he was like, yeah, stop it, Tim. If you keep pushing this narrative, they'll stop us doing it and then life will be boring.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's a fair point, I thought, you know what I mean?
Well, one thing that's put me in mind of another question. I was watching a documentary a while ago about Gulf War One.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how they were flying so many, or the RAF were flying so many sort of ultra low level sorties and losing, you know, a bit of attrition going on there, and that the top brass got together and said, sort of, why are we doing this? Do we even need to be flying so low all the time? And they decided, no, we don't. It's just needlessly dangerous, and so they sort of stopped doing it. I mean, so but we still do it though, right? I mean, that's part of what, you know, the Tornado's all about, isn't it?
Well, the Tornado's out of service now. Went out about a year ago, but yeah, the Typhoons don't tend to fly too much low level. The F-35, I don't think has done any yet, because if you damage that thing, you have to send it back to the manufacturer to get it fixed. I remember when the F-22s came over, they put some down a valley in Wales. That was quite good. The issue being, I think, well, so if you keep, well, there's lots of factors here. Let's be completely brutally honest about it. If the job's not fun, I'm not going to do it because it's dangerous. It's got to be a bit fun. Low flying is mentally stimulating and taxing, and that is what fun is. Also, it's not fast for me at low level. When I'm doing that, I've got a process. I work in time, not distance. So I know that I'm doing 7 or 8 miles a minute. Well, I've got a minute then, haven't I, until I've covered 7 miles. So what do I need to do? If the airfield's 21 miles away, I've got 3 minutes to plan. I'm doing 7 miles a minute. So I've got 3 minutes. I might as well have a cup of tea first and just sit here and chill. So people are always going, oh, you're so busy. Things. I'm like, I'm not busy for the next few minutes. I've got a turn point up there, but it's not until minute 12, and it's minute 10 now. I've got 2 minutes. I'll just chill for 2 minutes. The world's racing past. The thing about low level flying is, I'll tell you what happens with low level flying. When you go on red flag, which is a big exercise in North America, and it's the closest you're going to come to some active kind of war where people are trying to shoot each other down, you push at medium level. Everyone pushes at the medium level. 20, 30, 40,000 feet, you push. Everyone pushes. Right up, your plan is a medium level plan, fly along, drop some laser guided bombs, turn around, and all the other aircraft out in front of you hopefully would be targeting the people trying to kill you. As soon as one of those bad aircraft gets past those good aircraft protecting us, and they try and attack the bomber package, all the bombers roll upside down and they pull and they go to the ground. They go down to the desert floor, and then they run around at 540 knots, almost 600 miles an hour, about 9 miles a minute. Every minute they're covering 9 miles. I've been down there with German Tornadoes next to me, crossing me, all down at 100 feet. We're all down at 100 feet, doing around about 600 knots, because it's hard to get shot down there. You know, no surface-to-air missile system is going to see me because I'm lower than a snake with legs. Snakes, obviously, if a snake had a leg. But also, I mean, enemy aircraft, all the ground clutter for their radar, it's very hard to target me. So that's the safest place. And that's why I wrote an essay in a magazine a couple of years back now, arguing, and the Swedish Air Force liked it. I think they were having a problem with it at the time. Arguing for the utility of low-level flying still to be taught, so that it is a skill that you can reach into your tool bag and still utilize as and when you might actually need it. And if you don't do those things, this is the same with critical thinking being taught in school. If we don't teach critical thinking in schools, for example, we can't expect our kids to critically think ever. We have to give them those skills. Same thing with low flying. If you never teach it, you can't expect the pilot to use it and stay alive. They were flying too low, obviously, in the Gulf. A lot of people were hitting the ground and dying without actually being shot down. It was mindless. And so they just went, hey guys, step it up a little bit. I say to my pilots I train now, okay, they're sim pilots, but they're still, you know, a lot of them are real pilots actually. I've got real fast jet pilots in there that fly. I've got airline pilots that fly. I've got students in militaries that want to keep their skills because they're flying. I say, look guys, if you're not being targeted by anything, what are you doing down at 250 feet? Just step it up to 300, 400, 500 feet. Give yourself more brain power time, you know? You can see more from there. You can think more. If you start looking at a knee board, you don't hit the ground. You just drift down 50 feet. You're safe. And then if a missile system comes up on your radar warning receiver and goes beep, 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 you're like, he's having a look. I'll come back down again. You know, I'll come back down. Oh, he's gone away. Strange that. But don't sit there. You know, like constantly. When we flew at 100 feet in Scotland, it's called operational low flying. Tornado is a big aircraft. 100 feet is not actually that high. It's like the height of when you're driving down the motorway, you see the telegraph, the pylons of electricity. It's like that high. So we're doing that 100 feet. It's called operational low flying. So you book into a low flying area, got a navigator with you, and the navigator says, "Mate, I'm going to do all the work in the back and the lookout. I just want you to stare through that head-up display and keep us at like 120 feet, 110 feet, whatever it is, you know what I mean?" And so the pilot goes, "I'm not looking at anything. I'm not looking out for other aircraft, nothing. Because if I move my head from here, death comes very quickly. So I'm literally just looking out the front and just flying. I'm completely occupied on flying, not systems management, nothing, flying." And so it's like, yeah, that's what they're doing in the Gulf. And they learned pretty quickly not to do that. They learned pretty quickly to, step it up. I understand it because I wouldn't want to be out in the Gulf like that. Crikey, those missions are horrendous. So,
because are you actually susceptible to just ground fire? Just somebody with an AK could shoot you at 100 feet, right? I mean,
yeah, they could, but the thing about it is,
it's super rare. But the physics allow for it, no?
They do, but the chance of one of those bullets hitting you is very rare because, of course, what a lot of soldiers see an airplane, they point at the airplane, they fire the bullets, and of course, the airplane's not there when the bullets reach it. It's you've got to lead, and that's what that gun camera footage teaches you in the Second World War, isn't it? Take a lot of lead, roll for lead, pull for deflection, and now fire, and the bullets will end up in the same place because the aircraft will fly into the bullets. That's the whole point. So you wouldn't get like an Iranian wedding party going, "Oh, there's a tornado. Have some of these. Have some AK stuff." You know what I mean? You'd be like, "Mate, concentrate on the cake here. I'm just trying to kill cows or whatever and fly around." So I doubt you'd take fire, but you would be. I mean, it's safer to be down low. Because less things can see you, but as you do come up, there's a lot. You are a big piece of metal in a big piece of sky, and the Tornado GR4 did have a massive tail on it that used to reflect radar quite well. Used to call it the land shark. You used to have to see this tail behind a hill type thing going around Scotland. It's like, oh, there's a land shark. There he goes. Brilliant. So yeah, I used to do that, but.
Well, it's one of the things you mentioned was about the Hornet. That's the F-18, right?
That's right, yeah.
And there's the Super Hornet as well. I was listening to an F-18 pilot talk about talk about various things about the F-18, and well, one of the things, and maybe it's you're just so massively overqualified to be answering a question like this, but the Blue Angels.
Yeah.
I once saw some footage of them flying really, really slow with the plane sort of this sort of angle, just really slowly, very, very close to the ground, super close, like 20 feet to the ground, doing that. And they were saying that you need an extremely powerful plane like the F-18 to do that. You can't do that in a Hawk, for example. Is that right? And is that particular maneuver? I've never seen it since. Is that sort of a crazy thing? Is that relatively easy? It just looks cool, or I mean.
Yeah, it's not. Well, this is where every F-18 pilot in the whole of the world hates me, because I say, but it's a lovely aeroplane in sim world. Obviously, I read the manual, so I don't. When I fly and when I teach my men, and the women, I teach them from the actual flight manual. So I go and get an F-18 flight manual. Because I've always read flight manuals and written some in my time, it's very easy for me to go, what's important here? Let's do an overview, preview, in-view, review of this manual and go and get the bits I need. So I learned about high alpha handling and all this kind of stuff in the Hornet and things like that. It's got a high thrust to weight ratio. It's a light aircraft, to be fair, with good engines in it, big, powerful engines. But it's, so let's be, the engines are pretty good. So what you've got there is you can, as you slow down an aeroplane, it's actually, the aircraft's quite interesting. It's got a central balance point. So when you actually come into land, you can tie what's called the E-bar, which is like an energy management bar in the HUD with your velocity vector, and actually fly the aircraft purely on power. The nose will come up on power, and you pull the power off, and the nose will come down. That doesn't happen with all aircraft in that flight range, but the Hornet, because it's slow speed handling for deck operations, of course, coming in very slow, bring back capability, big wing, all these things lend itself, and the leading edge root extensions down the side of the cockpit lend itself to high alpha handling. So you can pull like 30 alpha in that thing, and the alpha is the angle to the airflow. So if you're flying along, air is here, you're flying along. If you then pull the throttles back, let it slow down, it will build. The center of pressure on the wing will come forward and it will lift the nose up. That's what happens as you slow down. You'd also increase the drag, of course, because I'm turning my airplane from a horizontal line into a nice sort of plate type thing. Put your hand outside a car, do that, you'll feel the pressure on the hand. So as the it slows down, so wing, if it's nicely doing 200 miles an hour and it's nicely level, and then you make it do 150 miles an hour, you have to adjust that angle to increase the amount of lift on the wing to keep it in the same place. And so that's what the Hornet does. As it slows down, it'll be very slow speed, doing about 130 knots, a lot of power in the engine, and it will just sit there all day. It's the way they designed the airplane back in the 70s, and that's a really great way of doing it. That has problems, of course, with drag and other aspects, but it's quite unique in its capabilities for that high alpha. The other aircraft, F-15, F-16, F-14, they don't have that. But that's why they went that way with F-18. I think the guy who ever spoke to is absolutely right, But then they did lose one in Canada doing that, because the problem is you're slow speed and volatile, and if you suck up a bird and an engine goes, you're not getting out of there. You're not. That engine's gone. The aircraft's going to rotate, and you have to eject. And if you're lucky, you get away with it, and you save yourself. But yeah, it's a trade-off, isn't it? I mean, pilots like to look good.
Well, that was one thing I want to say then about it's sort of the 12-year-old in me has got a couple of questions, just the sort of the fanboy thing. But you talked about how, or I've heard you talk about, how the T1 is relatively dangerous. Lots of people have died in T1s, and not so much at all in T2s. And that even though there's a lot more power in a tornado, you get to G-lock quicker in a T1.
Yeah,
and things like that. So it's not necessarily the plane that's got just the most power.
No,
it's a lot more complicated than that. And I wondered, if you could just maybe talk a little bit how it's deceptive. That something like the things that the Red Arrows fly. Well, I've heard other formation pilots say that it's not an easy plane.
No.
much harder than a Hornet, for example, to master. And just sort of your thoughts about that sort of thing, and what a difficult job the Hawk T1 is.
Well, I think all display teams, to be fair, are just driven by excellence. In fact, that's the motto of the Red Arrows, isn't it? The CLAT. And they would do whatever they can to improve themselves. The Red Arrows are a classic case in point for this. I mean, they push boundaries because they have to, but they are the best display team in the world. And the guys I know in there. I was chatting to one of them a few weeks ago. Actually, he was saying, "I love what you're doing with the sim work," and I was really grateful to get that, because it's nice to get endorsements from your mates. But they have accidents. The Red Arrows, if you look at the amount of accidents they've had over the last couple of decades, they will be known as the most unsafe display team in the world. That's just a factually correct statement. We can't get rid of that. It's just the truth. Does it mean their practices are bad? No, it doesn't mean they're bad. It means they've done a lot of work to make sure they're very safe. But what they're doing is very hazardous, in the same way that the Thunderbirds are, or the Fleet Tickeroli, or the Blue Angels. Blue Angels lose people, G-lock, I don't think they fly in G-pants in the team, and they don't fly masks. They use boom mics, and I really don't know why they do that, but they do use boom mics. I don't know. I haven't even worked it out. But so if you're saying why, so the key with G-lock, and this is one of the service inquiries I did, was into Red Arrows pilot. I went through something called A-lock or P-lock. And that's the preceding condition before G-lock. G-induced loss of consciousness is where if we pull loads of G, so like we do on a roller coaster or something, or on a fairground, if we do that through the body, the blood will come out of the brain, and the blood carries oxygen, and of course the brain needs oxygen. If it doesn't get anything, what happens is the brain says, well, hang on a second, this is really bad, I need oxygen. My brain needs oxygen to function, so I'll shut it down, because else I'm going to be, the heart's, I'll shut it down. It shuts the brain down for about 45 seconds is the amount it takes the time to recover. You'll come around again in about 20 seconds if you put back at 1G, maybe a bit less than that if you're a healthy guy or a girl, but you won't know where you are with G-lock. You'll be in an airplane going, what am I doing here? This is crazy. And I know people it's happened to, and they're like, what's going on? After about 40 seconds, you're like, oh, I'll take control again, start flying. What happened there? A-lock and P-lock is very different. If Americans call it partial loss, we call it almost loss of consciousness, which is what happened to the guy in the Red Arrows that I did the service inquiry on. So it's a condition where if you were under it, you pulled some G, you haven't gone into G-lock, but you've been enough that your brain has gone, I'm just going to try and shut down a bit here, just to, because you need to be straining against it. If you've misdone that maneuver, or you haven't done it, or you've done it too early and dilated the blood vessels, you increased a high blood pressure, and therefore your blood vessels go, I'm just going to open up a little bit and let the blood flow and make it a lot worse. So that's what happened to a friend of mine. And if you were in an aircraft with a guy under A-lock or P-lock, you just could hit them and go, hey mate, and you go, oh yeah, what's up? Yeah, what's up? It's all good. But if you don't, it could be at 3 or 4 G, sat there quite happily. If you don't realise it, They could stay in that condition until they come back to 1G, and then they're like, oh, I felt a bit weird there. You know what I mean? Now, the reason that the Typhoon's got a lot of life-saving equipment on it. It's got positive pressure breathing to inflate the chest cavity. That helps keep the blood in the brain because it's compressing the chest. It's also got G-pants on there. So the G-pants inflate to really compress the blood in the legs, to stop there being any room for the blood in the brain and the upper body to actually go down into the legs, to try and keep it in the brain. So the Typhoon, you can have a guy in the Typhoon sitting in 9G, apart from the neck, which can really suffer, he can pretty much sit there, or she can pretty much sit there at 9G. Fine, happy, that's great. But the time to get to 9G, the time to actually get from 1G to 9G is longer than the Hawk takes to get from 1G to 7, 8, 9G. The Hawk is a little sports car. It can get there really quickly. Now, I suppose the way to look at this, I guess, is like, say you've got, what cars? I've got some stupid cars at the moment. Say my wife's MX-5, for example. Nippy little thing, isn't it? Nippy little thing, MX-5s. But my Audi, my big RS4, whatever, is faster than that car. But I know my wife's MX-5, A to B, is probably faster than my RS4 around country roads. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Above 110 miles an hour, leaves it behind, doesn't it? But so the Hawk T1's a bit like that. So the Hawk T1, so onset rate is what kills people, not necessarily sustained G. So you and I could be flying together, and I say, right, we're going to sit at 3G now, see how you feel. That means everything in your body is weighs three times as much. And so you sit there and you're like breathing a bit, going, yeah, okay, I've got this, Tim. Yeah, this is all right. I move my neck, feel heavy, doesn't it? Oh, heads are heavy, strangely, especially when you put a helmet on them. Yeah, things are a bit heavy, Tim. Yeah. Okay, let's come back to 1G and have a chat. Because you're sitting at 1G right now, you know what I mean? My cup weighs X at 1G. It weighs 3X at 3G. Well, at 9G, it's weighing 9 times. So the problem is, when you get to that G, if you reduce the time at which you do get there, you also reduce the time it takes the blood to flow from the brain out, and it happens quickly. It's like bang, and that's what kills people. And that's why the Hawk isn't. That's not the only reason the Hawk T1 kills people. And I'm not saying the Hawk T1 does kill people, but it has killed people because it's been in service since 1974. So 40 odd years, whatever, 46 years. The T2 has been in service since about 2011, but the T2 has a lot more safety systems on it, right? So the T1, they all have safety cases, these aircraft, and I honestly can't understand how they're still flying Hawk T1, because it has no head-up display, it has no ground proximity warning system, it has no radar altimeter, it has no moving map. All these things help preserve the life of a pilot, because if I'm busy doing some maths, when I have to write down a frequency, if I've allowed at 250 feet, I've allowed my aircraft to nose over a little bit because I'm not paying attention. With a radar altimeter at 225 feet, it starts going beep, 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 beep. And I'm like, oh, okay, roger that, got it. And even if that doesn't go on, the ground proximity warning system knows all the ground around you, and it will give you a pull-up command and say, pull up. And you go, oh, what's that? Mountain, fine. Goat, there's a goat. So, these things make aircraft safer. The Typhoon has these things. The Tornado had these things. The Hawk T2 has these things. It also has TCAS, traffic collision alert system, so avoidance system. That tells me where other aircraft are. So I'm flying around now. I'm like, oh, it says he's over there. Got him. Yeah, happy with that. T1 has none of this. So people like flying the T1 because you're never gonna fly an aircraft like that again. Like, that's it. When you step off the T1 and you go and fly a Typhoon, your Typhoon, your F-35. And I flew a lot of T1, and I really enjoyed the T1. I really did enjoy the T1, and I flew T2 and enjoyed the T2 as well. To be fair, I just felt the T2 was. I know Hawk T2 pilots. I speak to them all the time who've gone out to Saudi to teach. They've come back. They've been offered jobs on the T1, and they've said no, just because I've got kids now, and I just don't really want to. You've got to be on your game if you're flying T1. You just have to be. Right. Just make sure you're sharp about it, and fly it a lot. And just don't do things that are stupid, because you won't anyway, because people don't do things that are stupid intentionally in flying jets.
I feel like it's like a little Caterham or an aerial atom. And,
that makes sense.
Like the Tornado's more like a Lambo, like a GT something.
Yeah,
a bit heavier, still fast.
Dash or something, isn't it? It's that kind of era.
I wondered again. One of the last sort of 12-year-old questions I wanted to ask you. But just the out and out speed. Like, is it right that the Tornado can do sort of Mach 1.2, something like that? Would you take it supersonic very often? Is that a real no-no? You'd never do that, or is it just par for the course? You do it every time you go out, or what?
Well, my Tornado
What's that
didn't.
like?
The F3 did. The F3 could, because it had ramps in the intake to slow the air down, so you didn't have supersonic airflow on the compressor blade. You don't want that. You can't compress it because bashes off them. We removed our ramps from the GR4 because we're a truck. We're a load carrying thing. All we're doing is bringing bombs to drop on a battlefield somewhere. So we're not supersonic. You wouldn't be able to go when you hang stuff off stuff. It slows down. You get not only drag, you get interference drag, which is the difference between the actual big thing itself hanging off there, bomb, fuel store, and the thing that it's actually attached to. So the difference between that. So there's always drag that adds up, and drag is proportional to speed. So the faster you go, the more drag you get. Something very interesting happened on the Tornado GR4 that I was flying. Was 617 squadron. My squadron was 12 squadron, and 12 squadron was the first squadron to get the Royal Air Force first squadron to have the Victoria Crosses during the Second World War, with a guy called Sergeant Thomas Gray, who was the navigator, Donald Garland, and there was a radio operator in the back as well. He didn't get a VC, but he was called Royston Reynolds. He was a leading aircraftsman, and that was in Belgium. In the Second World War, 1941, I believe it was. Let me just get this correct. I think it was around about that time. Anyway, yeah. So we've got an aircraft with the Victoria Crosses on it, but we flew from one side of the airfield. 617 squadron flew from the other side of the airfield. Very young squadron, of course, made up in the Second World War. We were one of the oldest squadrons in the Air Force, so that was always a good banter. But they used to fly with 3 fuel tanks on. They used to fly with 2 big fuel tanks on. We used to fly with 3 or 2 little fuel tanks on. Now, they said they got more time airborne because they had more fuel, and we disagreed. We said, no, we get the same time airborne as you have because we have less drag. So we have less fuel but less drag. You've got big tanks, we've got little tanks, and when we used to exchange pilots across them, all the 617 pilots were like, I don't know why I'm dragging these big tanks around. I'm getting the same time airborne that you guys. I'm using 9.5 tons of fuel, you're using 8.2, and I'm getting exactly the same time. So there is that thing that when you start putting massive amounts of ordnance and bombs and everything else on an aircraft, you're not supersonic anymore. Right. All the aircraft in the Air Force, I mean, the Typhoon is a powerful engine airplane. So yeah, I don't even know what they register. It all comes down to fit as well. So if you're hanging loads of AMRAMs and ASRAMs on a jet, then you're no longer allowed to do 1.7 Mach. You rip pylons off. You're probably down to like 1.2 or something, or 1.2. I don't know. I'd have to ask the guys, and I haven't asked them, to be fair. The F3 was supersonic, of course. That could go supersonic, but mainly clean, i.e. without much on it. And when you start carrying Skyflash and all sorts, it's more of a limitation, and G is limited as well. When you start hanging bombs and fuel tanks on the Tornado, to pull G and to go too fast puts extra stress on the airframe, so you limit that. The F-18, for example, all F-18s limited to 7.5 G. That's what they can do. That's their G limit. They have a paddle that you can pull that gives you 33% extra G, so 10 G instantaneously if you need to, but you'll overstress the airframe. And the aircraft automatically limits the amount of G you can pull, and it tells you what you can pull depending on how much fuel you have on board. Heavier you are, less G you can pull. Makes sense. Airliners don't pull much G, do they? Because they're quite heavy. But most aircraft, all the training aircraft, can go up to about 550 knots. Typhoon obviously can go, but you're not doing supersonic flying every day. I mean, you're not doing it at all because it makes loud bangs and smashes windows, and it costs a lot of fuel. You burn a hell of a lot of fuel, so you don't run around anything more than 0.8 Mach, really. So you're not at Mach 1, you're 0.8 Mach. In the Tornado, we fly around at 0.73 Mach. Same for the Hawk. This is up level. This is at 20,000, 30,000 feet. And that's fine, 7 miles every minute. You're getting somewhere. I used to, when I drove down in the house I'm in now, it's around Herefordshire. I'll keep it secret, innit? You know what I mean? From terrorist attack. But attack from my fan base, which is 2, of which, I think it's just you and me at the moment. I used to fly the jet down just to check the roads. It took 17 minutes. 17 minutes. Then I'd fly back, get in the car. It would take 4 hours. You know what I mean? So, kill me now. This is going to suck. So yeah, they are. I mean, that's the thing. Speed isn't what everyone thinks it is. You can't just get in a jet and just race off. There's a lot of planning involved, and there's limitations by airframe and design, all sorts of things like that. That's why the wings moved on the Tornado, of course, because we didn't move the wings. They would start shaking from the drag. So we trimmed the wings back to 67, and it would look well.
It makes me think again of like a race car, a Formula One car, where it's, in Q3, it's a very different machine to when they're racing it. It's
Yeah, yeah,
almost a completely different beast,
yeah,
really.
yeah,
So it puts me in mind that I guess, especially in training, you'd very rarely be in that configuration to go
yeah,
as fast as it can possibly go. It's just,
yeah. I
but you
remember
need to practice that, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. So we have training rounds sometimes, and we always have to go and drop bombs for practice. And I remember when they strapped a paveway 3, I think it was I was in North America, flying out of a place called Davis Montham onto the Barry Goldwater Range Complex to drop paveway 3s, laser guided bomb. And we put tanks on because we need them. We put, I think, a bomb on each, and the airfield in Tucson is 4,000 feet up, 4,000 feet high, 10,000 feet long. We're doing the maths, and we're like, you know what? It's going to take most of this runway to get bloody airborne, guys. It's going to we're going to have to use most of the runway. And we're
Well,
like,
because
well,
the air is so thin because you're at altitude. Is
yeah,
that
it
what?
just makes a
Right,
difference. Yeah,
right,
4,000
right.
feet exactly. Yeah, so the engines don't perform as well, and we normally fly out of airfields that are, how the UK is. We don't fly on top of mountains, do we? I mean, Valley is like 37 feet above sea level. So I'm like doing the maths on this, going, this jet will get airborne, but it's going to be at the end of the runway. You know what I mean? With a sharp pencil. And taxi distance is an effect as well, because you're really heavy now. We weighed 28 tons, I think, that day, which is a lot for an airplane. And of course, the tires heat up because it's hot as well. So it's 28, 29 degrees. So you've got a tire temperature limitation. And when I came back from that sortie, I taxied back in. It was just over a mile. And the check card said, your taxi distance limitation is 1.2 miles. And we taxied past 1.2 miles. And as we pulled into where we haven't got rid of the bombs, got rid of loads of fuel, having taxied back in, the main tires, the fusible plugs exploded and the tires deflated. To stop the tire exploding, the fusible plugs go first. You see, they heat it up and they go. And the jet just sat on its main gear. And I'm like trying to almost go in a reheat the taxi. My navigator's like, we're not moving, are we? I'm like, we're not moving. And the engineer's like, no, you're not. Your tires have gone. But that's how hot it was out there and how bad. So, and when they first put brimstone on the jet as well, brimstone points downwards, and you're dragging this thing around like. Ugh! So using all your fuel up, it's a game. It's a game where you go through and you look at the drag index of all these different stores, you add it up, and then you work out whether you can carry enough fuel to go and do that mission.
I heard you talk about well, a couple of things. When on some of the VR stuff, you talk about because you make it as realistic as possible, and you do sort of the comms and stuff. It's great, and a lot of the things you say is that the checks just before you've taxied onto the runway, use all the runway you can, and then you do your sort of literally the last checks.
Yeah.
And you always say about check the seat is hot. So seat's live. Yeah, checking that it's gonna work if you need to use it.
It's a bonus. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, have you ever ejected? Have you ever needed to do that?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, great. I mean, what I really wanted to ask you, a number of things have gone wrong, right? If you ever find yourself having to use that. And so I wondered if a pilot did ever have to eject, is it a massive black stain on your record, or do they just look at whether it was your fault or not? And and if it's not your fault, it's not your fault.
Well, for a start off, pilots are really expensive to train.
Right.
So, and they're not dicks. So they're investing in their own training, and they want things to work. I've never met a pilot that's done anything malicious in the air. And I'm serious there. Other pilots out there will go, I knew a guy who was gash. Well, you did, I didn't. I didn't know any guy. I flew for the Royal Air Force. I was proud fly for the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy, and we didn't have gash pilots. They're idiots, but they're not in the air. You trust them, and they're trustworthy because they're professional. They don't do stupid things. Now, sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes engines stop. I mean, I've surged a few engines in my time, and sometimes they don't come back again. Sometimes the flying profile, like the Hawk, doesn't have an alpha gauge on the T1. Doesn't have a stall warner, so you don't know when the aircraft is going to stall. We're trained to recognise a stall. The stick shakes a little bit, and if you get it wrong, and you're in the final turn coming to land, we've lost loads of Hawks that way. The jet can stall, and you have to get out because it's going down really, really quickly. And a couple of guys I knew when I was flying with them, they did get out, and they were lucky. One was quite late, but fair enough, they got out. So they're not blamed for it. They're like, okay, what happened? Right, stall in the final turn. Are there lessons we can learn from this? Okay, was it? We do say, was it negligence? People that die, unfortunately, we have to look at suicide as well. If you die in an airplane, that's very unpleasant, but we have to rule it out, and it is ruled out very early, by the way. I mean, it's the first thing we do is like You're not being funny. I don't know anyone that's killed themselves in an airplane or used an airplane to kill themselves. I don't know that. I don't think we're those kind of people, to be fair. We are when we leave the service, by the way. Suicide is a big factor, but in the service, it's not. I will put a caveat that it's not in the flying branch, as in aviation, professional aviators. I don't know professional aviators that have killed themselves. So, but when they have accidents, we just have to have a look at it, which is very unpalatable, especially the family knowing that. But it's just one of those things. It just then rules out. And then what happens is you say, right, what's happened? So a jet's crashed. When did it happen? This afternoon. Fine. What jet was it? It was a Typhoon. Right. Let's just stop Typhoon ops for the day, shall we? Let's get everyone back on the ground. Make sure it wasn't contaminated fuel. Because you may have aircraft flying and the fuel they've got in board, we don't know whether this is contaminated fuel. Let's bring all the jets back. Let's not tell the pilots why. Let's just bring them back, chill them out. We'll land, go and feed them tea. And then we've got the jets on the ground. We can go and dip the fuel and make sure it isn't contaminated fuel. Right, fuel's okay? Fuel's okay, good. Right, tomorrow maybe we'll start flying again. But is there something we need to know before we go back flying? And then you go, right, what was the jet doing? Low-level flying. Okay, is the pilot alive? Yes. What does he say? He hit a massive pterodactyl. He hit a pterodactyl, whatever, not a silent P, sucked it down the engine, blew up. Right, guys, can we not hit dinosaurs, please? Can we not hit flying? Everyone, swans. I had a mate who hit a swan. He had a good guy. He hit a swan. It was on a T1, a Hawk T1. It jammed the nose wheel up so that wouldn't come down. Main wheels came down. He had to land at a relief landing ground, and he had to a hole in the bottom of the aircraft, and he could see the sky beneath him, and this swan going, "Oi, what's going on?" Not much alive swan, actually, to be fair, but he had to write a letter to the Queen to apologise.
Really?
Apparently, Buckingham Palace wrote back saying, "We've got some spare. You're fine. You know what I mean? Don't worry about it."
Oh, it was to apologise for the death of the swan, not breaking the aeroplane.
Queen owns the swans. Yeah, he managed to land the aeroplane.
I thought it was to apologise for ruining one of Her Majesty's aeroplanes. No, it's the swan they're worried about. Okay.
Yeah, good guy. Actually had a right for it. He landed the airplane anyway. Just landed it on the sort of front bit, and it stopped. It was fine, buffed out. You know what I mean? Well, you go and fix it, don't you? But yeah, the guys that have ejected, and I know loads of them, obviously, because they're mates of mine. And they all kind of say it's a bit of a non-story, really. We always train to do it in the simulator anyway. It's like, I don't really remember pulling the handle, or, I messed up. Normally the first thing I say is I messed up. I was doing air combat, I did something wrong. The jet spun and I was below the height. If you're below a certain height and the jet's spinning, you get out. Or I had a mate who dropped a Harrier. He got a Harrier circuit wrong, and a brand new Harrier that had been delivered like the day before, taking it to another base. A good friend of mine, actually, he's a really good guy. I think he's out in Canada now flying. And I said to him, what happened? And he said, I messed up. He said, I was coming around the final turn. I moved the lever that I thought was supposed to be the throttle. It wasn't. It was the nozzles. The aircraft inverted itself at about 600 feet. Like, no recovering from that ever. Never going to. And so he reached down, pulled the handle when he was upside down, but the aircraft had just come around enough for it to fire him out sideways. If he pulled it upside down, he would have been killed. No two ways, but he'd be dead now. Because the seat doesn't always save you. Especially slow speed, you need a vector going upwards most of the time. The seat isn't just something that saves you. It does need energy. Anyway, he managed to get swung out. Parachute opened straight away, and he did one or two swings, and he saw the jet tumbling, and it hit a police car and destroyed a police car. I was on someone else's show. Who's that guy over in Cambodia or something? He's a dude. I was on his show, and he's a great
Chris Dangerfield.
Yeah, I love Chris Dangerfield. He's a funny guy. He's mad as a stick. Clever boy, actually. He's clever. Don't get me wrong. He's fair point. He is. I think he makes out he's not, but he is sharp. And when I said that, all of his audience went, "Yay!" I said, "You can't cheer." They called a police car. It did though. It destroyed the police car. And he said that as he was in the parachute, looking at this jet smouldering and the police car smouldering, he just pulled the parachute canopy away. So he just turned away from it like this. He couldn't watch what he'd just done. Funny thing was, though, he ended up going to hospital. That's right, because his parents were watching. The parents said, "Oh, come and do a circuit. We'll be at Kiddington and watch." And so his parents were there. They picked him up. They took him to hospital. Of course, you go to hospital, you're in your flight suit, lying on this big thing. And the doctor says, "What happened to you?" "I ejected from an airplane." "What does that mean? What do I do with you?" You know what I mean? "Oh, I think I've got back damage. I don't know. Neck issues. Arm hurts." He goes, "Oh, I don't know." What he's supposed to do is tell them, "I've been in a car accident about 300 miles an hour. So treat me like that." You know what I mean? And then they go, "Oh, high-speed car accident. Oh, we can deal with that." Because I understand that. It's like, I don't know what to do with an ejectee. I work in, Nottingham Hospital. I don't know. So eventually they put you on this bed. They cut all your flight gear off you. And of course, you're like, "Don't cut it. I'll get out of it." And they're like, "No, you're on a spinal board." It's like, "Don't cut it." "Oh, you've cut my books up. You've cut everything up. Oh, what's going on?" Then you're lying there naked with no clothes now. and they put this little gown on you. This is what my mate said anyway. And you sit there for a day. The boss comes down on a train normally. His boss came in and said, he won't mind me telling people. I'll call him Dave. It's not his name. So he's lying there. The boss comes in. He went, boss, it was my fault. The first thing he said, my fault, boss. Because he knows the rest of the squadron isn't flying until they know what happened. He's like, my fault.
Right.
And the boss said, what happened? He goes, there were these 2 levers here. And he goes, which one did you pull? The wrong one. He went, that jet was pretty expensive, to be fair. All right, get better. I'll see you on the squadron when you get well. So a couple of days later, they give him the all clear. And they say, right, you can leave. And he gets up and he's like, I haven't got any clothes. And they're like, well, we can't do anything about it, can we? What do you want us to do about it? You've got a blue gown. And he's like, I literally have no clothes. So I think he had to go to Tesco's in his blue gown with a towel around him, like literally walk into Tesco's and go, I'll have that T-shirt, those jeans, those socks, those shoes. Walk back out, get changed in the car park and get on a train. That's it. It's like, no one brings you anything. You're like,
that's nice, isn't it?
Sorry, I'm an ejectee. I crashed my jet and I want to train naked. You know what I mean?
So that is quite embarrassing. That's quite a reversal of fortunes, going from a Harrier, in the air in a Harrier to just naked in a
naked on a train. It's not my fault, guys. I'm not a stripper. I literally just crashed my jet. I'm sorry. I've got to get home. The boss is going to tell me off. But yeah, they just said to him, all right, let's have a look at it. Let's put you back in the sim. Let's check you out again. I mean, his thing was quite new on the jet at the time anyway. All the Harrier mates were like, yeah, obviously the Harrier crashed. Of course it did. Always crashes. And yeah, so he got... He carried on flying because it's expensive. He's a very good pilot, in fact, to be fair. I flew with him for many years. Very clever guy. You tend to find that as well. A lot of clever guys crash airplanes. A lot of clever guys die as well. And as you said at the beginning of the conversation, that's something you sort of carry with you when you walk to work. You're like, hang on, that guy was beating me at all the scores. He was a great guy. We all know he's a great guy, and he's just died. What's to say I'm going to come home today? And I think that's what you kind of miss when you leave. Is you're kind of pretty assured that you are going to come home today. And when you're in the service, it's the other way around. It's like, well, I better make sure I come home today.
Right.
And make sure other people come home, because you're flying with a lot of young people and you have their lives. And I was fortunate enough never to lose anyone on a squadron that I was on. So I think the culture, hopefully, that I carried around with me was that, and that was okay. But I know commanders who have lost people, and it's not a nice thing to deal with, is it?
Yeah. I appreciate your time, Tim. If I could just ask you maybe one or two last questions to sort of round it out. I know you've said you're not sort of gagging to get back in sort of fast jets or anything. And the VR stuff is you're happy with that at the moment. But if I could just hypothetically, if and when you do ever get in that space of wanting to do it, in the real world again, if there were a magical hangar with everything that exists that we know of anyway, from an F-22 down to a microlight, what do you get in? Again, if and when you're in the head space for it, if you could pick anything that's out there.
Well, what tracks me then? That's the thing, isn't it? What tracks me? What have I looked at recently? I looked at sort of cruisy airplanes, like a Robin. It's like it's an French-built airplane, wouldn't, and that you just go cruise around in that non-aerobatic. And I thought, well, that'd be quite nice to fly around, read a magazine, drink a cup of tea, and land somewhere. That sounds quite civilized. And then I've gone the other way, and I've gone, well, can you kit build like a little sock with camel? Well, I can't take the wife with me. Well, that's quite nice in a way, isn't it? Because then I haven't got to listen to her chat. But let's pretend that I had to take her with me, because else she does this thing about how the relationship isn't any good because we spend all the time apart stuff. And it's like, yeah, for a reason. Say we had to have 2 cockpits then. Do we then get like a Tiger Moth? And if we did, can I make sure it hasn't got an intercom so I don't have to listen to her? Is that possible? Or do I have to be on comm together? So there's that. And then so we look at those airplanes going, all right. Can we put a picnic in the Tiger Moth to make her happy and go and land in a state at home? Maybe that's possible. If we didn't, what else? Gliding doesn't interest me because it's too much. When when people learn to ride horses. I'm the guy that wants to learn to ride a horse that is ready to be ridden, and I want to give it back for someone else to put all the stuff up, right? So for gliding, I don't want to open the hangar and bring the gliders out. I want the glider open on a tow line, ready to go, and then when it lands, I want to hand it back to my man. You know what I mean? So I'm all about the. That's what you pay for, surely, isn't it? When you go flying, it's like, just give me the jet with fuel and let me fly. So I'm a bit time conscious, which you've taken 2 hours off, by the way. No worries, I'll send the check through. I'll send the bill through. Sorry. And so I don't want to spend too much time faffing with it. Jets are uncomfortable. You have to wear all the flight safety gear, and also to carry on flying jets, there's a lot of things you do. I had to have 86 different qualifications, different currencies. Sorry, I had to repeat every month, 3 months, 6 months, yearly, 2 yearly. whatever it was, such as sea drills or ejection sheet checks or simulator checks or emergency rides. There's always something. You've got to be current in these books and that. It takes it all out of you. It takes the fun out of it as well to a certain extent. So it's a job, okay? That's the thing. That's why they have to pay me like enough money, which they never seem to pay me at all. I think they forgot. So I'd look at something maybe like a... I look at, what would I look at? I am quite into that open cockpit experience. I think I might look at that in the future. The rawness of it, I think, would be quite nice. I enjoy flying the Northrop F5 in the sim that we're flying. I quite like the aeroplane. It's a very pointy, darty, no fuely, heavy burning engine-y, 1960 typey, single cockpity. They forgot to put a wing on it, didn't they? It was like the F104. It's like, there's your aircraft. It's like, hang on a second, there's a major component missing of this, and it is the wing. You haven't given us a wing. So it's like, oh, yeah, it's kind of a rocket with a man on it. I think I'd skip things like lightning and stuff like that. I think I just would. I'd probably kill myself. Phantom I always wanted to fly. I like flying with navigators. I like navs, actually. I like chatting, just having a good chat in the air, you know what I mean? It's boring, isn't it, to fly by yourself? Unless you haven't got any friends. Maybe you're higher on the spectrum, I suppose. That's probably why you want to be in a cockpit by yourself. So I'd probably look like that. If there's anything, I think F5 would be pretty fine. I mean, I'm quite lucky. I get to choose aircraft for the guys to fly when they've got good enough on the other aircraft. And some of them are struggling and we're doing a lot of work because it's complicated. And that's why they're there. To learn on the syllabus that I've built, which is made of the Hawk syllabus from RAF Valley. We just applied it to the F5 and the F18. If any of the guys are interested, just put a link in your little thing below, and they might, if they fly DCS, and then they can come and learn. So I'd probably, I don't know. I think I'm not saying I get bored of Harrier. They've all got. I'll tell you what, it's funny, isn't it? It's like cars. They've all got something to do really well, and then they've got other stuff they do really badly. Every jet's like that. So Harrier, yeah, it didn't carry that much, and it went viff, noz, and that was fun. Not much fuel, but that would have been fun. I flew in one. I flew in the back seat of a naval one, actually. T1 is always a great airplane to go and fly. Hawk T1. Thinking Americana, the F18, I think I've had enough fun just on DCS. I don't think I'd fly that for real. So, and I'm skipping. I'd say a Mosquito might be quite fun. I think I'll take that for a drive.
Oh, really?
Mosquito. Yeah, I think so.
Do you think it's one of those things? It depends sort of what mood you're in. Because if someone said to me you could drive any car in the world, my answer would probably change on different days.
Oh, God, it would.
Yeah, right.
I've got an RS4 and I'm like, have I got to go out in that thing again? It's loud, it's bangy, the suspension's hard. I'm in Herefordshire with potholes and cows and tractors, and I'm in an RS4 that is just breaking my back. A lot of the time I'm like, okay, I've got Seat Leon. I like that. I'm just going to drive a Seat Leon. You know what I mean? And it's automatic as well. With the automatic thing, leave it there, drive along, cup of tea, happy. It does. You're absolutely right. My wife, she's got a couple of MX-5s because she bought two cars in different she bought the same car in different colours. Most women do that with shoes, by the way. My wife, I married her because she was pretty, not clever. And of course, we're struggling now a little bit, aren't we, as we all hit mid-40. So I might have to trade her in. But either way, she's got these two cars in different colours. She's got a Mark 3.5 MX-5. She went and bought a Mark 4, the tiniest car in NATO, this MX-5. I get in it at 6'1". I'm like, you're taking the piss. What am I supposed to do with these things that I call legs? I've got nowhere to go. It's up there, like the knees up around the head somewhere. I'm like, who made this car? And then you realise it's made in, where there's smaller people in Japan, isn't it? And it's like, I get it, but the Mark III worked really well. They tried to make the Mark IV, this has gone on to cars now, tried to make the Mark IV the same size as the Mark I. Well, it's like the Mark I was a Mark I for a reason, because it was in a time when we made small cars. And we don't do that anymore. I can't fit in it. So she's got this, it's like, when she says, let's take the Mark IV MX-5.
Is that the orange?
Yeah, it's the orange, yeah. It's not a car lift in the garage now. I bought a car lift. That's a man toy right there. Buy a car lift and you sit there just going, and watching your car go up. You're like, oh, I've achieved now. This is fantastic. And then you put another car underneath it. We ended up with too many cars, and it's ridiculous. I don't know why. And now no one wants to buy them because they're all high mileage anyway. So I might have to just, I don't know, burn one or something. I don't know.
Car lift is pretty cool though.
It's not expensive, actually. I think I paid about, this is going to come across expensive. I think all in with fitting was about 1,800 quid. The guys come down, they brought their daughter down. I fed them bacon butties, and they just fitted one to the Leicester goalkeeper. Is it Peter Schmeichel's? I can't remember. I don't know much about football. And they said, yeah, we're going to do a car lift. What are you going to put on it? I said, well, L'Orange MX-5, L'Orange. And they went, "Oh right, yeah, we just done Peter Schmeichel's ones yesterday. We put 2 of them in there. He's got 4 McLarens." I'm like, "Shut up and to do it with you. Shut up." And...
This is in McLaren orange, but it's not a McLaren.
Yeah, it's not a McLaren. It is a and that's the. I'll tell you what, it's the most delicate paint you've known to man. If you look at it, it chips as well. And apparently they made it like that to keep it light. And I'm like, oh, how do you weight saving with a paint? Come on, that's taking the piss. And surely we've got to don't cut the back of the mirror out or something, or just. I'll tell you what else they did. We're not even talking about history anymore. They didn't even put any storage inside. You've got no glove box. You've got no door inserts. There's nothing. The cup holders you pull out and you go, well, let's chuck them out then, save some weight. There's nothing. I'm there going, what do I do with my phone? I'll balance it on my head, shall I? Because there's no other space in the car. It's ridiculous. It's a lovely car. But the history of the MX-5, there's a great video out there. It might be Smoking Tire or something, and it goes through all the different. Or Savage Geese is a good guy. He's a really knowledgeable guy about cars. He did one on the history of the MX-5, and they're standing underneath them on his very expensive car ramp, going through all the differences. And I love that. I'm a big fan of like automotive history and stuff. So I didn't realize you were a Formula One fan as well. Actually, I must admit that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, love it. I haven't made any videos about it or anything. I keep meaning to. Like I think I will do one day on sort of 70s, sort of Jackie Stewart era stuff.
Fantastic. James Hunt and stuff. I love James.
Yeah. Just love it. And again, it's sort of the extremes, because it really was extreme back then. I mean, people,
Nicky Lauda, all that kind of, I mean,
people dying on live on TV and stuff. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. But
Grosjean's crash, did he?
Sorry?
Grosjean's crash that he had when he went into the barrier.
Oh yeah. Very old school thing, wasn't it? You don't see that. You haven't seen that in years and years and years and years.
No.
Actually, there's one last question. If you
go on, Em.
Not pushing my luck too badly, and this may well sort of ruin any sort of credibility I might have built up with you over the last 2 hours, but I must ask you it. Some people have sort of insisted I ask about UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Did you ever see anything up there? Ever?
No, I didn't. I don't know anyone that has, to be fair.
Really?
No one's seen anything. I'm not saying it's not there. I think there's technologies there that we just don't know about. But I never saw anything. I was pretty busy, though, to be fair. You don't get much time to look out. Yeah. People always say that. Do you enjoy the view? It's like, was there a view? I don't remember ever looking. You're so busy working the kit and the radars and being on time somewhere to start this event or that it's very rare you get a chance to look out and go, oh, those are nice mountains. Oh, it's very pretty. It's like just head on fire the whole time. So there could have been ET sat there on his bike, like right in front of me. Like, and I would never have seen him. He could have done every single day, like going home, and I'd be like, "What ET? I don't know what's going on." So, I don't know anyone that has seen anything.
Fair dues.
We used to turn the lights out at night. We used to, in the jet, we used to fly Hawks at night all the time, and we used to turn all the lights out completely, and you'd have the stars above you and all the street lights beneath you, and you could watch all the shooting, quite high, 30,000, 40,000 feet. Then you'd watch all the satellites, and you'd watch all the shooting stars, because there's no light pollution up there, is there? You know what I mean? You might even be above the clouds. So clouds stop at about 30,000 feet, top of tropopause. So troposphere. So you just see all these, you say, oh, there we go. And it was like literally spot the space station or spot the satellite, and you'd be in a jet with another mate and he goes, I've got a mate right 1 o'clock high. Right, I'm looking. Oh, there it is. It's really cool. So but that could have been aliens, couldn't it?
Cool. Amazing.
I hope that's been all right for you. Your audience went about an hour ago. They probably audience went about an hour 45 minutes ago. Probably, to tell you the truth, they're not there anymore. They're like,
no. I think people really like long form stuff. I
think so.
I just think there's a market for both, isn't there? You know what it's like. Sometimes you've only got 5-10 minutes, and other times you're looking for something to have on in the background for the whole afternoon, aren't you? So,
I do a lot of that. Yeah. I do a lot of that. I just replay myself. No, I don't. Have my YouTube channel on the background whilst I'm doing the ironing or something. Can you imagine that? The last thing. Do you like me though? When you hear yourself, back, or you watch one of your videos, you kind of hate your voice a little bit. You're like, oh, I sound an idiot. You know what I mean?
I used to. As when I first started, I definitely was like, oh. I got used to it a fair bit now. Yeah.
I just think it's one of those things. I don't worry. I used to really worry about length, show length, and And now I'm like, you know what? If you want to come and watch a video, do it. I don't watch some videos and I watch others. I'm not trying to tell people to come and see my stuff. I think you're the same because your channel is so interesting. I mean, it blows my mind how you manage to keep all that material in your brain. It's not like you're sitting there with like loads of books out. If I was doing what you do, I'd be sitting here like with books out everywhere. And then when someone was saying something, I'm like, right, what chapter is that? Oh yes, so Margaret was the daughter of Edward, and blah 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 blah. You don't do it. You're just there somehow. I remember you talking to one of the guests, and he was like, I didn't know any of this. How have you? You know what I mean? He was like stunned with it. He's like, yeah. So what were we talking about? We were literally, when you do it, do you start with like a theme and then you just like when you went with Sargon or whatever? Did you know what you were going to talk about, or did you just kind of go, let's have a chat about history then? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, we would sort of say a topic.
Yeah.
And then, it's sort of a bit of a cheat, really, in a sense that I might give the impression that it's just sort of all sort of at hand. But the reality is, so for example, Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
I've been fascinated with that my whole life. I've literally, like a couple of decades worth of learning around it. So it's sort of like, to some people, it seems, oh, wow, what an incredible sort of depth of knowledge. And it's like, no, I've watched the same things and reread the same books many, many, many times. My memory isn't really that great, particularly.
Yeah,
I'm not like my problem solving ability isn't great. My IQ isn't particularly high, but I've reread the same things, sort of crazily the same stuff over and over and over again. So to have it at my fingertips actually is just sort of a no-brainer to me. A bit like you, I expect, when people, because sometimes you talk really technical about things, you'll just mention your or something or other, and to people it's sort of, they don't really know exactly what you're talking about, but to you it's just second nature because you've spent a lifetime with it. I think it's one of those things. But you're very, very kind. I really appreciate your
it's
words.
been really good. I wish I didn't know much about history that much, so I've got favourites, if you do again some point, I'm more than happy. We talk about F1 and stuff,
Oh, Tim, that would be bloody brilliant.
I love that.
I would love that.
I love F1, yeah.
The only other thing I would want to ask, and again, I might edit this out and stuff, but
Norris together.
Would you ever? Sorry.
Go on.
Well, I don't know. Would you ever want to talk about, the combat stuff in Iraq when you actually flew, or is that stuff you don't, particularly want to?
No, you can do. It's pretty dull, to be honest. Most of it was reconnaissance work, so I don't know whether. I mean, but that might be interesting for an audience.
Well,
like, what does it mean to? Yeah. I'm more than happy to talk about that. We'll just come up with some crazy stuff. Go, well, let's talk about like some kind of, make that a theme of like, how can we get like a conversation about like current drivers in with like. But I'll tell you what the theme for you right now is how some jobs can be 99% boredom and then 1% sheer terror. Because that's kind of like what a Formula One driver is. If you look, what's the last was it the last Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, wasn't it? What was that? That wasn't the most interesting race in the world, was it? It was like, are we going to keep doing this? It's like, I sort of fell asleep halfway through. But then we look at other races during the season. They're like, oh, it's amazing. I'm so glad I watched that race and I was there for those moments and it was excellent. I love it. It's brilliant. And you get involved in all the social stuff and everything and you listen to the drivers and their personality. It's brilliant. But to be fair, 99% of a race car driver's life is just boring. They're playing video games or whatever, aren't they? And getting worked out by a masseuse or physician. And then they're in the car going, this is going to suck. You know what I mean? So I think that's a hard job to be. And that's like sometimes what jet pilots like. It's, am I going to fly the same sort I flew 3 times this week again with a different person? That's going to suck. Oh, now I've got an engine failure. That doesn't suck anymore. That's going to, that's my 1% of sheer terror for the 3 months. And that keeps me coming back. They say that about golf, don't they? I don't play golf, but I probably should. You can have a really bad round of golf, but as long as you hit the ball once really well, you'll come back the next time because you'll be like, yeah, I love golf. It was an amazing day. It's like, no, it sucked. Everything sucked. But no, I'm more than happy. I'll come back on. It's been great, to be fair. I've got to go and speak to my pilots who are trying to land on aircraft carrier at the moment. It's going to be chaos.
Sure, don't let me keep you. I would honestly be honoured if we could talk again sometime. I won't bug you for too long, but I will mail you again. And once again, I really appreciate your time.
That's all right. I mean, I do a live thing. If you do live stuff, you can come on my live thing and talk about a history or anything you want as well. But that's just live. Normally do it on a Wednesday. If that wants to get you out, I've got my audience is about 25,000, I think, and I'm a big fan of, especially us small YouTube channels. I remember when I was small, I got dragged on someone's channel. He had more followers than me. I picked up some followers, and we just keep doing that because I think your content is very underrated. And I think seriously, like you watch this stuff on TV and it's curated and stuff, and yet you watch the stuff you do and you're like, there's something fascinating about it. And it's probably because I don't know where you're going to go next. or how your brain is going to reach out and go, oh yeah, so these 5 sisters, but she kept the pony, she was a guinea pig fan, and she did. And it's like, what is going on? It's crazy. I think there's a real big market for that. So if you want to come on and discuss it, and we can discuss, how you built your channel, what you're doing, why you're into history, I think that's fascinating. That is, and I only do an hour. I won't keep you for 2 hours.
Sorry, yeah. So I did warn you at the beginning. If I could, it would be. I'm not joking. If I could, I'd have you for 5 hours here. I could just go on and on and on. But I know you've got things to do. Sorry, I've only got more important things to do. So yeah. Once again, thank you.
Okay, cool. Well, give me a call. And also, if you review this and we realise we've stepped on each other and it's been rubbish, then we'll just record it again somewhere. You know what I mean? We'll just get it done. So if it's not good enough, let me know and we'll just square it away. All right.
Brilliant. I think it's good. But thank you very much.
All right. No worries. Let me know how it goes. All right.
Take care.
Talk soon, mate. Cheers. Bye.
All right.
See, I'd like to debrief this guy. I'd be like, we use something called runways, just in case he didn't realise. And I'll sit him down and go, mate, that's a tree. Not being funny. That's not a runway, it's a tree. Don't land your airplane in a tree. What must you not do? Don't land in a tree. Good. Debrief done.